Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to our PAX West special, because this year we went to not one, but two PAX events, PAX West, although in this instance, Matt did all of the representing for the podcast.
I did, yeah. Geoff was at a wedding this weekend and couldn't make it. And Frankie is preparing to move overseas forever, which is also good for them, but also,
yes, but the opposite direction of going west.
Yes. And so I went, I had a media badge, and I was also on a panel with previous guest of Side Quests, the incredible Jacob McCourt, who did Video Game Trivia Live.
And was also on our Kirby episode.
Oh, and was also on our Kirby episode. That's true.
Yeah.
And I lost horribly along with Morgan Shaver, but we were attractive-looking non-binaries, and so that's all that mattered. But it was a lot of fun. If you want to watch it, the VOD is on, or should be at this point, still on PAX 2, which is one of their two Twitch channels, because they have separate channels for the different conference rooms. So you can go watch that. Also, there's a chance Jacob will release it in some other form by the time you're hearing this. But as of when we're recording, that has not been figured out yet. But stay tuned to socials. We will definitely share it or have shared it wherever it's available. So just keep an eye on our socials and you'll find wherever that is available.
That's fantastic. I unfortunately did not get a chance to watch it live. I look forward to seeing the challenge of things, because I hope we could be a duo on this one day and also attractively lose once again.
That would be wonderful, and I am urging Jacob to submit this for future PAXs. Probably PAX East is the next opportunity he will have to do that.
Excellent.
If we end up as a Fun and Games duo on that, I will definitely keep all of the listeners posted.
Excellent. Well, aside from the panel, there were, I'm told, a lot of video games at PAX West.
You heard that, huh?
I did hear that. I saw that. I several senses experienced this fact, even from a different time zone. What were some of the highlights that you got to check out, Matt?
So there were a ton of really great games. I didn't get to see them all. I didn't even get interviews with all of the creators, though. We do have 11 incredible interviews for you to hear on the back half of this episode. And I say back half, but it's more the back 2/3 because there's a bunch. But one of the first games I saw during Media Hour is a game called Gunbrella. For those who are not familiar, Gunbrella is a Metroidvania-style kind of side-scrolling action adventure game. It is by the same people who made Gato Roboto, which was a favorite of mine from a few years back. And it is about a lone stranger coming to town with a gun umbrella, and he's going to right wrongs. There wasn't much more info than that as you start it. In fact, I believe one of the NPCs goes, "You're a guy with a gunbrella. What other backstory do you need?"
I mean, yeah, and I don't know whether or not it is all of the childhood love for Meredith Burgess's Penguin from the Batman TV show, or just Adventure Zone, or my own just weirdness. But I am definitely one of those people where it's a gun umbrella. What more do you need? I don't need anything else. If it's halfway decent, you've already got me. So sounds great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got about 30 minutes with the demo, and then I moved on to some other stuff. But I got to see a ton of really cool things and do a ton of cool things. I know I made Geoff proud. I went to the limited run booth pretty early on and bought the special editions of Shantae and Risky's Revenge. The first and second Shantae games, the Switch ports, come in these big, square, Game Boy Color-esque boxes, which just sleeves the Switch actual box inside. I'm very excited to have both of those games. And as you will hear in a later interview with Bannon Rudis, the game director of River City Girls 2 and a game director who's worked on a bunch of the Shantae games as well, I may or may not be close to having a complete collection for reasons you will discover later. I was really happy to go to the limited run booth right away. We also have an interview with Alina, who is one of the marketing directors, I believe, at Limited Run, which is also really exciting because we got a little inside scoop on the kinds of things that go into the Limited Run process, the things that are coming in the future. We even talk a little bit about the Embracer Group acquisition. And so that was really cool to see Limited Run in the physical space and meet some of the people behind that stuff. But I got to see a ton of really great games, a lot of which we actually have interviews for. I saw Demon School, which is a mix of Persona / Shin Megami mixed with tactical RPG elements with a 16-bit aesthetic. I got to see Sherwood Extreme, which is a co-op, as it sounds, archery extreme sport game that is actually free early access right now. Anyone can download it, and it has online co-op. It is you or you and a friend running around killing goblins and with a bow, an arrow, or crossbow type. And you can, whenever you jump, hit I believe the right mouse button to slow time, to give yourself like bullet time.
Kind of that like Breath of the Wild thing.
But extreme, like think Max Payne slowdown. Like it's a really big slowdown time. And so you can line up shots, blow up ships, kill goblins. It's actually really a lot of fun, and I'm excited to try it with a friend. But the single player demo that I played while at PAX was a lot of fun. I interview Solar and Gabriel, who are the heads of Cage Studios who make that game. I got to interview someone from Whitethorn Games, Brian Wilson, who is one of the acquisition experts who like finds people to bring under Whitethorn Games. Geoff, of course, knowingly loving Calico, which is made by Whitethorn. Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, the cool thing was even stuff I didn't see and stuff that we didn't have interviews for, like Splatoon 3 was there in full force. Nintendo had a giant booth, which they didn't have at East. There weren't really any AAA publishers or like big name game companies at PAX East this year. It was mostly an indie showcase. It was still mostly an indie showcase here, but like Tiny Build had their giant booth again, which they had at East. There was really a lot of cool games to see, and like I'm even blanking on some of the stuff I played because I got to interact with so much, and I don't want to take away from the incredible interviews that I got to have while I was there.
Now, PAX West had a stronger presence from the larger developers and publishers. How much of a live presence did they have? Was there a lot of either keynote or sort of presentations or timed previews for upcoming Nintendo titles, Microsoft or Sony?
So they didn't really have any keynotes, but there were some big main theater shows that I got to go to. I had front seat media access, which is very strange. I went to the Gearbox software presentation. Randy Pitchford is still Randy Pitchford. It was a very weird experience. If you go to previous SideQuest guests and future main show guests, Scott White's Twitter feed, and look back a couple of days, well, from this, it'll be like several weeks. But if you look for his PAX West tweets, he tweeted through most of that presentation. It was very bizarre. It was some interesting things, though. Like, I didn't know Gearbox Software was now also a publisher, and they are actually publishing the new Hyperlight Drifter spin-off game that's coming out.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, I had no idea about that stuff, but it was a bizarre presentation, to say the least. Something that I would go see again just for the spectacle of it all. But also I got to go to an incredible panel my second to last day there. Rogue Games, which is an incredible indie publisher, did a panel about what goes into publishing indie games along with one Reggie Fils-Aimé, which was really interesting and really exciting. They showed off a ton of cool games coming out, including one that I know Jeff's going to like called Sea Frog. Sea Frog is a Metroidvania with a surfboard.
There you go.
You play as this cartoon frog, and you're like exploring these pipes and these areas, but the map layout is very Metroidvania, and you get different upgrades in a Metroidvania style, but it's very cartoony, think like kind of almost Hello Kitty kind of style. It's very bubbly. But the conversation was really interesting. They had 3 different developers who are working on games for Rogue Games on the panel, as long as I think the marketing director and the CEO of Rogue Games, and then, of course, Reggie. And Reggie had a lot to add, talking about the industry and the kinds of things that indie publishers want to work towards and indie developers want to work towards to get their games noticed. All of the games that were showcased that are coming from Rogue Games look really good, including a few others that weren't even at that panel. I did want to try and chat with the CEO, who's also named Matt, but didn't get a chance, but we did connect. And so I'm hoping that Geoff and I can have Matt on for a full-length episode of Fun and Games, because I think Rogue Games' vision of what indie game publishing should be like and the kinds of games they want to bring to the forefront was really interesting and really cool to see. And so that was a really fun event that I got to go to as well. Besides that, I didn't go to a ton of panels. I wanted to go to a bunch of them, but didn't get around to it. One of the other panels I went to was actually one run by the aforementioned Scott White, who is also the host of RPG University. He had a panel that was essentially 6 degrees of Tetsuya Nomura. And it was a bunch of panelists, including previous guest Hunter Bond, who worked on Infernax. The panel was awesome. The goal was the audience members gave a name or a game or a character, and they had to connect it to Tetsuya Nomura. I'm going to butcher that name at least 3 more times.
Did they have like access to Google, or was this just how
Yes.
good? Okay, good.
So the rules were The panel got like 2 minutes of research and then had to pull it together. Previous side quest host Matthew Finnerman was also on there, who did our Blade Runner episode, as well as a bunch of other really cool folks. Cam Hawkins was also on that panel. And they
top tier folk.
They pretty much never got stumped, but there were some like really barely connections. Their test character was Commander Shepard, so I couldn't use that, but I did throw Sunder from Boyfriend Dungeon at them, and they did do it, though I couldn't remember how. They connected Sir Isaac Newton at one point, who technically counts as a video game character because he was in one of the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego games, or Where in Time, I think.
Yeah, and his infamous mention in Mass Effect 2 doesn't count.
Right. Well, I guess that counts too.
Deadliest son of a bitch in space.
But there were some really good pitches that they connected back. It was really fun. I believe Scott is going to release it as an RPG University episode later on. So. And so if he does, I will make sure to share that with our audience. But yeah, I saw some really cool live events. And like, I wanted to go to more panels, but I ended up booking so many interviews, a bunch of them last minute, that I couldn't fit them in. I'm hoping at the next PAX East I can go to more stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff to see, even more stuff than I was able to even see myself.
What a wonderful problem. Now, did it seem as though the panels and things that were going on at PAX West, even if you didn't get a chance to go to a lot of them, did it seem a little more on the, hey, we are hawking and selling our games in the more keynote style? I know you said there were none. Or a little more on the let's have some fun celebrating gaming, like Scott's panel?
It was an even mix of both.
Were there any you really wish you could have gone to?
There were a couple of indie panels that are previous aforementioned Cam Hawkins was on that I wanted to go to. There was one about discussing the sexiness of indie characters. I can't remember the name of the panel off the top of my head. That also looked really fun that I didn't make it to. There were definitely a ton of things that were worth going to. There were a ton of live TTRPG podcasts that was really cool that I didn't get to go to, but I buried the lead. Brett and Sam from our podcast network, who are two of the hosts of Let's Rewatch, I met in person for the first time while at PAX West.
Oh my God.
I get to meet their incredibly cute child as well. And so that was lovely. And Brett was there to see a bunch of TTRPG stuff. I also got to hang out with Tanya DePass, famously creator of the Motherlands and active TTRPG participant. We hung out a bunch during PAX West as well. But I didn't see as much of the TTRPG content as I would like. One of the in-person experiences that was really nice, though, is I did get to talk to Gerard, the completionist Khalil, who I've met a couple of times, but he was at the Yacht Club booth when I went for my interview.
That makes sense.
And so we got to chat for a bit. He, of course, playing the role of Shovel Knight in the very cheesy and ridiculous Shovel Knight Dig commercial that came out with him and Aaron of Game Grumps recently. I found out also that Celia actually pitched that and wrote the bones for it. And then their actual writers wrote the script and stuff. And,
of course.
She gets into that a little bit in our interview. But I got to tell Gerard how much his content means to me, how cool it has been to see his stuff grow. And just thanking him for being there for me in digital form while I was going through the apartment fire and other stuff. And he was like, dude, you're going to make me cry. Please stop. He was very sweet. It's always nice to connect with Gerard because I love the work he's doing. If you've not watched God of Work yet, it's about an hour and a half on YouTube. It's a short form comedy. What if the God of War himself, Kratos, worked in an office between his games? It's very goofy. It's very silly. It's absolutely worth watching and worth checking out.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. And also, speaking of other content creators that you got to run into, I saw that at the airport you ran into.
Yes,
Kid Icarus.
Jim Paddock, a.k.a. Kid Icarus. I was sitting, just minding my own business with no voice to speak of. As you can hear, I'm still a little hoarse. And I saw him walking by and literally behind my mask shouted to him. But I think he stopped because I flailed at him because no voice really came out. But then I pulled down my mask just enough so he could read my lips. And I was like, hey, I'm a big fan. He was very kind. His camera guy, Ollie, who works with him on a lot of the videos, took that photo of us, which I tweeted. And it's currently a very successful tweet having nothing to do with me and only because he retweeted it. But he was very kind. He was very sweet. And I've been a big fan of his work for a while.
Same.
He actually, just as of when we're recording, released a video about how he makes his videos, which is just as goofy as his other videos. But he was very generous with his time. We chatted for a bit and really just a stand-up guy. And it was cool to get to meet him.
Yeah. Now, as far as other connections go, was there any companies, were there any games, were there any creators that we've gotten to speak to in the past that you got to see again while you were at PAX West?
So there were a ton. I roomed with Josh Silverman, Cam Hawkins, Matthew Finnerman, and Scott White. So my entire Divinity crew plus Cam Hawkins were in a room together, which was nice to get to spend a ton of time this weekend with them. One of the heads of But Why Though, who's going to eventually do a side quest episode for us, Kate Sanchez. I got to meet her and her partner in person for the first time and hang out with them a bunch as well. I really got to see a lot of really cool folks. And then I got to meet folks who work for game studios that I might not have met otherwise. We have an interview with Beck Saltzman of Finji famously making Night in the Woods, Chicory, which I've talked about at length on side quests, and of course, more recently, Tunic. We got to talk about her and her husband's ethos when trying to bring in games for production when they produce stuff in-house and what it's been like during the pandemic, which was really cool. And then, like, something that's kind of a side note to this question, but was really important. And you're going to get to hear an interview with Kieran Kelly, who works for Larian Studios. My entire Divinity. So I don't know that I talked about this on the pod. Geoff and I both have Monday night sessions of Divinity Original Sin 2 with separate groups of friends, which I think is very funny. And my group of friends are the ones I've just mentioned. Because of Scott White's connection to Larian Studios and getting asked if he wanted to do an interview with them, he was able to pitch if his entire Divinity group could go interview him, someone from Larian, and they said yes. And so we got to play the latest build of Baldur's Gate 3 and then get to talk with Kieran about Baldur's Gate 3 and a little bit about Divinity and about our group and ask some silly questions about why Scott can't steal from people multiple times. And it's a really great interview. And that was kind of a highlight moment for me because I've been playing this game for over a year and a half with my friends. And now we got to interview someone really key to making that and other games happen. I also got the lowdown, I think pre-interview, that they just completed a Divinity Original Sin board game as well, which Kieran was, I believe, the lead on, which is really exciting. And hopefully we'll be at PAX Unplugged later this year so I can play it. Or if it's out already, pick it up. I don't know if it's actually been published yet, but it was definitely available there at PAX West. I just didn't get around to playing it. But that was really a highlight just because it was so silly and fun to get to do that with my friends. Which also, if you listen to Super Deluxe Games Cast or RPG University, that same interview will be airing there as well. So you can go show them some love as well.
And then we can compare who does the best editing job of interview audio, I suppose.
I suppose, yeah.
I've opened that door now.
Yes, you have. But yeah, I was hoping to run into more content creators. I think there were quite a few who were there, but honestly, I was kind of making a beeline left and right to do stuff for the show. And so I didn't get to see and meet as many people as I would like. But I did mention earlier Tanya DePass, who I got to hang out with a bit. And if you haven't checked out any of her stuff, she's also a streamer under the name Cypher of Tyr. Definitely worth checking out her stuff. She does some incredible work both in the TTRPG space and just in the gaming and inclusivity space as well. So definitely go check that stuff out. But yeah, PAX West was a ton of fun. I'm really excited for everyone to hear the interviews. I got to play so many great games. There's actually a game that I think, Geoff, you would like a lot that we have an interview about. It's called It's a Wrap. It's actually from AMC Games, and it's a puzzle platformer, but how it works is you're reviewing film from an action movie and you have to move the timelines to make stuff happen at a certain time. So then you could also control the main action hero and platform through the stage. And it looks like insert generic video editing software here.
Of course.
And it's actually a lot of fun and really silly because every time you screw up, the main character dies horribly, but he doesn't really because it's a movie set. So you like see him fall below the film set. You see him like disappear to different places. It's actually very fun.
So it's a little bit of Katana Zero, a little bit of Braid, a little bit of Beautiful Joe, and a little bit of Marky Mark Make My Video.
Yes, actually, it is all of those things.
I am so excited. I'm happy that I remembered all those names. That sounds really cool. And yeah, listeners, you'll be able to hear all of these interviews on the back half of this episode. There will be timestamps for when these start in all of the show notes, regardless of what platform you are listening to this episode upon. If you want to go to a specific one or reference it, or if you've listened to this far and you wanted to hop around to those specific interviews as we reference them, awesome, cool. But before we kind of wrap this up, Matt, were there any other shout outs you wanted to give, other games you wanted to talk about that you didn't quite get an interview for, or just any other little highlights?
I'm still, again, very grateful for, especially Way Forward and Yacht Club Games for being so generous with their time. They are highlights for me and Geoff personally because they are two of our favorite indie game studios. And then, of course, even Finji, who I've recently become a gigantic fan of. To get to talk with Bex was absolutely an honor and a highlight. And I'm very grateful for everyone who took the time to chat with me for as long as they did. It was really lovely.
And there was a lot of other fantastic indie games that were seen and interviews to be had. We didn't quite get to shout out everybody on this part of the episode, but you'll get to hear Matt chat with all of them on the back half of this. But we are going to do our wrap up now, and we hope you'll stick around and enjoy the rest of the interviews. But if you have any particular highlights from PAX West that you want to tell us about, any games that you saw, any TTRPG experiences, highlight panels, if there's anything we forgot, please let us know and reach out to us, because there's so many ways to reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at funandgamespod. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. And don't hesitate to reach out to us through those, or you can go to certainpov.com, where you can find not only a permanent invite link to our Discord server, but also links to so many other fantastic Certain POV podcasts.
You can also chat with us directly in all of those places. If you want to write us a review, there are plenty of platforms to do that. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much any podcast platform you use probably has some method of review, and we greatly appreciate Good Pods as well. We've been on the top 100 lists on Good Pods several times now, and I'm still not quite sure how that happened, but I'm not upset about it.
It's delightful.
And I got to chat with so many cool people at PAX. People came up to me after the panel. Mass Effect fans got to give out some Reignite stickers and stuff. It was just such a great live experience. And I'm so happy that I get to share it with all of you. And you get to hear the fruits of my labor in these incredible interviews that between me and Geoff would never happen, because though I got those interviews, Geoff is the one editing them. And it is absolutely teamwork, even when we're not there together. So we're just really grateful that you're here, you're listening. We're excited to continue to grow this podcast, and meeting all of these incredible people and being able to share their voices with you is a big part of growing this very community.
Yeah, we are looking forward to, health and safety permitting, more conventions, big and small, to highlight all sorts of indie games and different voices in the community and get to chat with them and chat with all of you. Having these sorts of back and forth is wonderful, whether into the industry or just amongst the fans and people of this medium and culture, because no matter which way it goes, this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
Enjoy the interviews, and happy gaming.
All right, I'm talking with Alina, who is the marketing director for Limited Run. Hi, Alina.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thank you for taking time to chat with me. I want to talk a little bit about how Limited Run has kind of revolutionized physical media. As video game players, we've gotten used to things only being digital and physical stuff being kind of something of the past. And now we have this entire company that's just mastered the ability to create hype for these games. How do you decide what you want to do physicals for? Is it based on fan reception? Is it based on the companies you're partnering with? How do you decide what you want to make a physical copy of that would normally just be digital?
Yeah, so there's a combination of different ways that could go down. For instance, shows like this, we'll walk around, see if there's anything interesting, see if they already have something in the works with the physical, and if they don't, then maybe we'll get the talking started. And then also we have devs that reach out to us. We reach out to devs if we see something that we really like. I mean, there's some cases where, games fly under the radar and people don't really know about it. But we'll see it and we'll know this is an awesome game and we really want to help them and boost them up. So there's just many different ways. And of course we always look at fan requests. And if it's something we think we could do or it makes sense, then we'll actually go for it. So
talk about a little bit about the older games that you've done. Things like old N64 games and things that there must be more licensing complications, things that make it a little harder, getting the gear that maybe doesn't exist anymore. What's that process like for going for more classic games, cartridge games?
So I myself don't have to chase down the licensing, but I know from the people who do in the company that sometimes it can be really, really difficult. Here's an example that's not exactly for a game, but for Ninja Turtle Shredder's Revenge, Josh, who's our founder, he's one of our co-founders, he was a massive Turtles fan, and back in the day it came with a Pizza Hut coupon. So he had to have that coupon in our release. He was obsessed with it. And it took him legitimately 2 years to finally get someone from Pizza Hut on the line to be like, hey, can we please do this? And then eventually they were down. So there's just so many examples where sometimes it's hard to find who even owns the licensing to this thing. You have to trace it back, do some investigating, go through all these different people. So it does get really complicated, but they're so passionate that if they want something, they just will not stop until they can at least figure out if it's possible or not.
Talk a little bit about the marketing side of it and getting the word out on these games. Obviously, you guys have a great website. You're often at conventions just like this. Talk about that process to kind of let people know what's going on, what's coming, the marketing blitzes you do for brand new games, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that like we use to get the games out there. So obviously, like, I'm really lucky that it makes my job easier that Limited Run has a really cult following, and they're collectors and they talk to each other and like they share our stuff, subscribe to our newsletter. So that's really awesome. There's a lot of businesses and companies that don't have a following like that. So, you know, we love doing live streams with the devs, with like creators. We like getting the artists on because like we know as collectors ourselves and as game fans, like I want to hear what those people have to say. So we do that. And then we do lots of blogs. Like we have Jeremy Parrish and Jared Petty, who are like really amazing journalists. And we hired them. We got them in to do like dope blogs, books for our games. So there's just a ton of different stuff that we do.
That's amazing. And talk a little bit about the kinds of games that you like. Like we talked a little bit before about how you kind of want to bring notice to games that maybe people don't get to see often, but also it's clear there are certain companies you love partnering with. You're here with WayForward today. They're showing off River City Girls 2. Obviously, you've published a ton of their games. What is it about WayForward that makes you guys keep going back to them and wanting to partner with them over and over again?
Yeah, so us and WayForward, we just have a really good relationship, and we've had for a really long time. Like, we have some of the same ideals, the same fandoms, and like we like the same stuff, and we're both like really easy to work with. So it just kind of makes sense most of the time.
Is there a game that you personally cannot get physically that you would love Limited Run to do a run of?
That I can't do it all. Well, okay, so there is, for me personally, there's a game that I could buy, but it's very expensive that I would personally love, and it's Toomba for the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
So expensive. It's technically there, but it's super pricey. I would love to do something like that. I'm a huge Toomba fan.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the PAX West experience. You guys were also at PAX East earlier this year. What is it like to prepare and create the marketing side and even just everything to bring the booth, set up? What is that like for the team to get it here and get to do this stuff?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of standing up and putting things together, but it's always worth it. Like me personally, I've always loved conventions because I love like seeing people face to face that like buy our stuff, that love games too. Because it's one thing to, you know, talk to people online or see comments online, but it's so much better when you're like having that in-person connection. But yeah, I mean, as far as prepping for it, like now we try to have at least one exclusive per each convention. It doesn't always happen like that, but that's been really exciting for me because we can make these cool things that we didn't release on the website just for the convention. Like right now we have the like Knights of the Old Republic VHS Steelbook, which is crazy and it's sold out. I wish we had more, but.
Amazing. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like during the pandemic when we couldn't go places. You could only do stuff online. Did you find it was harder to reach the audience that way? Do you feel like you do more when you can be in those physical spaces?
Yeah, you know, it's crazy. I think that may be true for some companies, but not for Limited Run. Like, we get more reach online, and we just have more of an online presence. So, like, really us going to conventions is mainly just because we want to show face, talk to people, and we love bringing, like, old runs that are out of print to these conventions so people can buy them for MSRP. Because, like, I mean, we're no stranger. We know what happens is sometimes people will buy them, and then they'll try to resell them for more. So any opportunity that we can get to sell them for what we sell them for MSRP, it makes us feel really good. And I know the fans like it. They don't have to go to eBay and try to find it there.
Has there ever been a pitch for a collector's edition that was too much? Y'all have done some ridiculous stuff. My favorite so far has been, which I didn't get one of my own because it just was out of my price range, but the Scott Pilgrim full cardboard band set up, like $200 edition, which had artwork and cards and comics. Has there ever been an idea that like someone that's in the company's be like, no, shut it down, we can't do that? Or is everyone just game to do bigger and better, whatever they can do?
Yeah, I mean, not really. Like, people in the company, they will go all out. Like, if it's something that we really, really like, especially like Scott Pilgrim or Turtles and Doom, like stuff like that, like we will go all out. The only thing that sometimes we have to scale back or reel it back is like, we have to think about the price for the customer, right? So, like, man, it would be amazing to do a replica, life-size, blah, 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 of whatever it is from the game, but it would cost this much, so we'd have to charge this much.
Right.
And sometimes that's a little bit too high for the customer. So I think that's the only thing that limits us is, like, we don't want it to cost too much, but we still want it to be cool.
Can you talk a little bit about the work that goes into the reproduction? Because you're not just doing old stuff, you're doing current stuff. Typically, it was just certain companies could print these games, but independent companies couldn't make this hardware. What is that process like to get the ability to do that, and then working with those companies like Nintendo, like Sony, Xbox, PC, whoever, to make those actual games be playable in those consoles?
In particular, the retro stuff is tough. I don't work on the manufacturing side, but I've had conversations with them about how it is difficult to find some of the parts that you need to make that stuff. So like some of the boards, there's only a handful of places I can even make them. And then we have a certain standard of quality. So like literally down to like, if you're doing like an NES cartridge, the plastic that goes over the board has to be like it was back in the day. Like it has to be accurate or people are going to know and they're not going to like it. So like there's a lot that goes into it.
The last thing I want to ask is there anything coming that you can tell us about that folks might not know about or that's new that you're really excited for?
I don't want to name any names, but Limited Run has their own Carbon engine, which you can look up more info on limitedrungames.com and then Carbon engine. So basically it's an in-house engine that's technically, it's emulation, but it's very accurate emulation. Mm-hmm. So we use Carbon engine to port Shantae for the Game Boy Color to Nintendo Switch. And we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline with Carbon. We just sold Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for Carbon. So there's some stuff coming out on that we're super excited for. And of course, we were just acquired by Embracer Group. And they've got a ton of IP that we'll let fans speculate like what could happen. But yeah, there's just good stuff happening.
If I could predict something I would really want, since Embracer Group has some of the rights to Lord of the Rings, especially the games, is do you remember the PlayStation GameCube era, Two Towers and Return of the King, multiplayer Lord of the Rings games?
I didn't play it, but I remember it.
Those games were some of the best multiplayer gauntlet-style games. Nothing has been made like them since. Wow. And like if Limited Run could redo those either for the previous gen or an update for the Switch, like that's the dream.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I will pass along that feedback.
Thank you. This has been so much fun just getting to know you guys, getting to hang out at the booth. Thank you for taking the time and being so generous with your time to talk to me. The last thing I'll ask you to do is you have a saying on the podcast. It's happy gaming. It's this idea that gaming shouldn't be as stressful, cruel, or mean as it tends to be on the internet. We should enjoy the games that we love. We shouldn't be judged for what we love.
Happy gaming.
All right, I'm chatting with Bannon Rudist from WayForward. Bannon, what do you do over at WayForward?
So primarily, I am a director and lead designer. So I'm a team lead, but I still do animation and art and design like that. I mainly, that kind of stuff, when it comes to artistic stuff, I try to do the stuff that I don't want my main animators to do that might bore them. So I will do like the idle animations and little background things. So I do that stuff too, but primarily my role there is director.
You obviously working on River City Girls 2. What other games have you worked on over at WayForward?
So the very first game that I did there was The Mummy Demastered. So that was them hiring me to train me to be a director. So that was animation, working under a guy named Austin Ivansmith. He did the DuckTales Remastered. So it's pretty much shadow him, learn from him. But while you're doing that, do all the animations and stuff like that. So Mummy Demastered was the first one. I've worked on the last Shantae game that came out, the Seven Sirens. River City Girls, of course, and then now River City Girls 2, which I'm just in charge of completely.
Amazing. So let's talk about River City Girls 2. River City Girls 1 came out, was a huge hit. People loved it. But there were complaints. Not that the game was imperfect per se, but things people wish were in the game, right? You can't put everything in a first game. And you were telling me before we started recording that you did a lot of research. You wanted to know what players really wanted out of a sequel. And so I want to talk a little bit about the quality of life things that you added to the game and why you did that and what people can look forward to that makes this game even so much bigger and better than the first one.
Yeah, so as I told you earlier, I was a creepy lurker in the Twitch stream. So I would watch players play it, couples would play it together, and I would just watch what the novice players did, what the experienced players did, what people, like the pros and cons of the game. And I would pretend that I was just a person watching. Eventually, I'd be like, by the way, I made the game. And, oh, my God, they freak out. I was like, well, I just wanted honest opinion. So from those Twitch streams that I watched for, like, the entirety of the actual development of Part 2, I just learned, oh, they block too much. Yeah, but enemies still need to block. How about we give them a guard breaking kind of move, kind of thing like that. Just things like that was just like, I wanted quality of life things to go in there. Oh, if I go up to a door and I attack, I went through the door. Okay, hold down the button instead of just tapping the button. Making it a lot easier to navigate with the GPS in there and the thing that I call the Honker app, which is kind of like Twitter. So it kind of leads you where to go, because I noticed people get lost. And if I made the game about 3 to 4 times bigger, they're going to get even more lost. So there's a lot more like guidance in this game, but we're not going to hold your hand. So it's not, you can go your own way kind of thing. So
I love that as a company, WayForward seems to take feedback from every single game and just look to improve them. I mean, I haven't played the whole Shantae series yet, but what I love about when you go from Half Genie Hero to 7 Sirens, it's just the quality of life is always scaled up. It's not that you're doing anything wrong, but you think of more things. Is that kind of like a motto at WayForward? Are you guys always looking to innovate and improve and expand on things you've done before? Because it seems from game to game, that's all you guys ever do.
Well, I mean, I think it just comes with the territory of like just learning from your mistakes kind of thing, or there's always things that we wanted to put in games and it's like, we'll get it on round 2 kind of thing. So I think that's, I don't know if that's a way forward thing. It's just a general, just in general kind of game dev thing of we'll get it the next time, budgetary constraints, deadline stuff. There's always a list of essential things that need to go in, imperative things, and then there's, this would be nice to have. Those nice to haves, next game always turn into, okay, these are must haves now. We need to put this in. And that, I think that's just general game dev in general.
Let's talk more about River City Girls 2. So this game is coming out before the end of the year. You had an incredible cast of voice actors in the first game. You reached out to incredible personalities, both on YouTube and the internet, you know, famous voice actors. Talk about the process for the second game of upping that scale and bringing in even more amazing talent to voice these characters.
Are we allowed to swear?
Absolutely, you are allowed to swear.
It was a pain in the fucking ass. The game is so much bigger. That meant there were so many new characters, but all the returning characters. So getting those returning voice actors plus all the new actors, I think it took us about 2 months to get through all the auditions alone. Because we're like, I don't play favorites. I've had, you know, voice actor friends that audition, and I felt so bad. I'm like, I'm so sorry you didn't get the part, because I wanted to give everybody a fair chance. Everybody that auditioned, we went through every single one of them, and we would hear that person go, that's that character. Like, that is it. We would always rank them. That's an 8, that's a 9, that's a 10 right there. Like, we're going to go back to 8, 9, but we'll listen to that 10 again. So we did that for every character, for every voice actor. So yeah, it's a pain. Plus, COVID did make it harder. We couldn't go into the studio.
Yeah.
The studio itself had the rule of 3 people max. So that was, you know, the person behind the board, the actor itself, and then the voice director, Christina V. So it made it a lot harder to do this. But so we trusted Christina V to be the guiding light and like get through that. And we just joined via like Discord or whatever, however we could.
I mean, if you got to put voice acting in the hands of anybody, Christina V is one of the most talented people working right now. So that's the way to do that. I want to talk a little bit. You brought up COVID, which we are hopefully on the tail end of. God, I hope so. But this game was created during the pandemic and within the pandemic, whereas the first one wasn't. What's the difference between making the first game when you could just do what is considered, finger quotes, normal, and now having to do this different way of working, everyone's remote? And what were the challenges that you faced that you wouldn't have if you all could be together?
For a good year, I didn't even go into the office. A lot of us still, you know, work remotely. Whenever I go into the office, sometimes it's just like Thursdays that I go in now. I go back and play with QA. It feels like we get so much work done. Like when I'm sitting there playing the game with the guys that have to play this game, you know, Monday through Friday, sitting down right next to them, I'm taking notes. So much more convenient that way than trying to just like, I email somebody or I message them and they get back to me when they can. They might be away from the computer, they're busy doing something. But when I made the first one, worked on the first one, it was, I would go to the VFX department, like physically walk over there, show them things. Even I have a mat there, so I'm like, oh, the animation, I need them to tumble like this. I don't tumble on the mat or whatever. So it's a lot more hands-on. So yeah, it did kind of slow things down, but we're still being very productive. We kind of got used to it.
it sounds like you're very passionate, not just about all games, but about this game specifically. What is so special about River City Girls 2 to you? What is so different this time around that like really stands out to you as like, this is the best thing that WayForward has done in the beat 'em up genre?
Well, my background, I, as a child, would draw River City Ransom comic books as a kid. So River City Ransom in general is just something I hold it very close to my heart. So this being the game that has like brought together like the stuff that I did in River City Ransom Underground, like little fan games that I was trying to make before I even became a developer, what I did in part one, this is kind of like the culmination of all the things. It's the whole like, all right, these are all the must-haves, and now they are the, oh, these would be nice to have. Those things are now all getting shoved in there because it's like, I want those nice to haves to all kind of like accumulate in this gigantic game. Like it is a very big game now. So yeah, it just, I don't know. I take pride in my work, and it, like I told you, I snuck in levels behind my boss's back to make the game bigger and more expansive. They never knew. They'll never listen to this. You're not listening to this, Voldy.
Well, let's talk about also, like, you were getting to show me certain secrets and talk about stuff. Is there a favorite, like, goofy joke or special moment or, like, little Easter egg that you've put in the game that you're excited for folks to find or experience?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't spoil anything. It is in the first world. So worlds we call, like, crosstown and downtown, like the different sections of the city. There's a hallway. And that's all I'll say. And I think it's going to annoy people. They're like, what is this hallway? It kind of looks like The Shining. And I just want to see what they think it is.
That's amazing. And you mentioned The Shining. There are clear references all over this game, both from the beat 'em up genre and even outside of it. I assume that the WayForward team are just a bunch of huge dorks who love to throw references into games.
Yeah, I mean, we're all nerds there. We wouldn't be working at WayForward if we weren't nerds. One of the main reasons why they even hired me is I went and had lunch with Voldy and Adam Tierney and a bunch of people, and any reference that they made, I just knew what it was because they all just speak the same kind of like, I don't know, reference language. So yeah, we just have to know all these like little inside jokes and things and like references to things. So yeah, it's just what we do there.
It's amazing. So, I mean, as a game director, I'm sure you have less time than you used to play games. But are there any favorite games that you're playing right now, whether in the WayForward catalog or outside of it, games that are really, like, inspiring you or making you kind of, like, proud to be a game dev?
So, Elden Ring is probably the game that confuses the shit out of me because making a game that's, like, 3 times bigger than the first River City Girls, it is nowhere near as big as Elden Ring. I have no idea how you even balance that game, how you QA that game, how you can play that game for like maybe 3 weeks and run into a game-breaking bug, then have to start over. I'm like, it blows my mind that they even made that game and how they even made that game. So every time I play it, I'm just like, how? How did they make this staircase go this way and it loops into this different world, but it all fits together? It all fits somehow. So every time I play that game, not only that, I get to play with my friends that I don't ever get to see. So that part alone, I'm just like, yeah, I get to play with friends while I try to decipher the code of how they made this game.
People are very excited about River City Girls. I know that a lot of my friends who are music nerds loved the album for the first game. Talk a little bit about the music and the process for getting the music for the second game. And like you told me a tidbit, when you approach the boss room, you will start to hear lyrics that reflect the boss's point of view. Is that something that was a conscious decision? Is it something that came up during the process? And like, talk about how you created this music with the incredible talent that recorded the albums for both the first game and this game.
So in this sequel, we had Megan pretty much take charge of like, Megan, you are in charge of the soundtrack. This is going to be more Megan focused. But working with her directly, it was more of I want to make sure that these songs mean something. It isn't just like random lyrics. This is from the point of view of a boss. So you kind of get where they're coming from and why they're doing the things before you go beat them up and just murder them or whatever. But also we were working with stems, so we don't have to have the same exact music playing. We can kind of like score it a bit. You'll notice when you pause the game, things go quieter. We have all the tracks, so we kind of do remixes with the sound designer of the game. So he was composing the game. Songs will queue up at certain like story events and things like that. There's even some parts where it's diegetic, so you can hear it coming out of speakers, or if a car goes driving by, you can hear the radio playing like some of Megan's music or the original music. There is even one part where you can hear music through a door before you go in there, into the next scene. So yeah, the music and sound in general really got like a glow up. It's good stuff.
What I love about River City Girls 1 and 2 is that the world feels lived in. Like from every car to every person to the people that you can knock into to your teacher that you can try and beat up.
So cars themselves, you'll be in a level, no cars in there whatsoever. You go shopping, whatever, come back to that level. Now somebody's parked their car. So I did want to make this feel like, oh yeah, people are coming and going. There's more citizens. There's a more diverse cast of citizens just hanging around. They're not all just standing. Some are sitting down. Some are looking at windows and stuff like that. You'll see some in a restaurant sitting down having dinner. So they all have like reactions to what you're doing. But for the most part, they're just like, oh, this is typical River City stuff. But yeah, there's sound elements too. When you get closer to some fences, you're going to hear dogs barking. You can actually physically see some dogs. When you get too far away from them, we did more 3D environmental sounds. So it kind of picks up on your spatial like distance. They start whining when you leave them, but they get angry when you get close to them. So there's a lot of like little things like that just to make this world feel more lived in, especially with the night and day cycle. So at nighttime, there's like more night sounds. You're going to hear the crickets and more crime in some areas. So Kevin, the sound designer, I just told him, just go nuts, like do whatever.
Was there any pressure to really go above and beyond with this sequel? Because you guys already knocked it out of the park with the first, but did you feel any pressure because of the legacy that this franchise has?
I mean, I've personally been working on this franchise for like 8 years now. I didn't feel pressure. It's just the pressure that I put on myself to do better. Like even like some of the stuff that we just talked about, like, it's a breathing city. Like I wanted to push it further. I had to rein myself back. Like I wanted people jogging, and I even wanted this stupid idea where you would see a happy couple in a house, and like more events go by, you beat a boss, you come back, you see them arguing in the window. Come back later in the game, like you're at 50%, you see like he's moving out, there's a moving truck out there, but the moving truck would be like a new platform for you to fight on, just stupid stuff like that. So I was like, all right, rein it back, Bannon. So yeah, it's stuff that I put pressure on myself to make it good, because it's like, not only that, I have to play this game for 2 years, maybe more straight. I want to make sure I'm having fun and the team has fun. They don't get sick of it, and they want to do more stuff in the game because they're excited about the game. They haven't got sick of it.
Well, Bannon, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. And I know you can't say when it's going to be out just yet, but tell folks where they can find the game, on the platforms they can find it on.
It is coming out this year. It's going to be available on everything. It is going to be multiplayer online. And yeah, so it is 4 players. We are shooting for 4 players online. I'm trying to be very open about this. 4 players online is a very hard thing to make work great. So guaranteed 2 players for right now. But yeah, we are shooting for the 4 players, still trying to fine tune that and get that ready. And here's yours. I'm trying to gift you while we're still recording.
Thank you. This is very kind of you.
There you go.
This is very kind of you. Thank you so much, Bannon, for your time.
What did I just give you?
Bannon just gave me a copy of Severin Sirens, Shantae, the newest Shantae game with physical copy.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. I genuinely do love this studio, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next. We have a saying on this podcast that I'd love you to say to close out the show. It's happy gaming. It's this idea that, online gaming can be so toxic and miserable, and people should be able to just to enjoy what they want, when they want, and just enjoy games. So if you say happy gaming, we'll wrap up the interview.
Hey, everybody. Happy gaming.
I'm here with Beck Saltzman, the CEO and co-founder of Finji. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming by.
So we're here at PAX West. I last chatted with you briefly at PAX East. It feels like a whole world has happened since that time. So many great games, more stuff coming out. Talk a little bit of what it's like now that we're starting to hopefully get out of the pandemic, and how things have started to ramp up for you guys.
In so many ways, it feels like I'm ramping down. Not really. I mean, I have huge titles out in front of us right now, but like so much of the pandemic was sort of getting one Chicory done and then Tunic done and then getting Exocolonist out the door, and sort of being at the end of that, I'm like, I don't know what, 3.5 weeks from our PS4, PS5 launch for Tunic. Like, I can't wait until October, where everyone else is like, oh shoot, I'm going into the holidays, we're launching all this cool stuff. I'm going into like October being like, hell yeah, I'm gonna take a nap. This is awesome. So the pandemic was, it was hard for a variety of ways, but also like we were remote before. and like we can sort of work within those constraints. And yeah, I'm just so excited that like we've sort of come out so strong through that time frame. I'm like so proud of our team and our development teams just working so healthy to get their games done and to do them so well.
I mean, like, also, like, this booth is always, there's always people playing your games, constantly. And, like, for me, these games have such heart. It feels like that's just the ethos. Like, every game has to have that special something, but they all have this like, kind of heart and warmth. Is that an intentional thing you're looking for when you bring these games under your wing?
I like that you're identifying that sort of piece of our games, but at the very, like, sort of base level, you know, I run this company with Adam, my husband, and when we bring on a project, because we're also independent developers, like we make games. One of these big projects out in front of us is like our own studio game. In order to work on a Chicory or a Wilmots or a Tunic or an Exocolonist or a Night in the Woods, we have to take time away from our own project. And there's like nothing more dear to you than the thing that you're creating. So when we look for projects, we're looking for something that like means so much to us personally that we don't mind that we're not making our own thing. So it usually has that, like this sense of place, this area that we really want to hang out in and to be with, the characters that we want to know better. A weirdo warehouse where you can just like use your own brain to like reorganize everything. All of this stuff is like, it's highly intentional. It's because we are obsessed with the game design and we are obsessed with the people making the games and we want to be a part of that. So yeah.
I mentioned the heart because it's important to me. Chicory is a game that came to me at a time. I always feel like I'm an imposter in this industry, as we all do. And to come to that game that just came for me so deeply and called me out in so many ways. Why Chicory so specifically, besides just a coloring book game? Like, what is it about you that really makes that game so special?
Okay, so I am a huge fan of Greg Lobanoff,
Of course.
like the lead creator of Chicory. So I met Greg when he was biking across the United States when he was like, I don't know, 21 or something. It was like so long ago. And he was driving through Austin, Texas, where we lived at the time, and he needed a place to spend Christmas. And I was a young mom at that point, and he was like biking in on Christmas Eve and eventually ran out of inner tubes for his tire. And I like went and picked him up 3 or 4 miles from my house and like drove him home. I didn't even know who this kid was. And then he stayed in my house for like 2 to 3 weeks while like sleeping a lot and eating just endless food because he'd been biking for months at a time at this point. And he, from my house, continued to bike up to San Francisco. But like, I got to meet Greg before he made Wandersong. And then I got to mentor Greg when he was making Wandersong, like really, really, really early on. And I got to like watch him complete that project. And then I got to be there and be his friend and sort of be around him as he started Chicory. And like, I remember I saw the Chicory, because I knew he was working on something. I saw the Chicory Kickstarter and I was like, I just like stomped into the room and I was like, Adam, Greg did another Kickstarter. Do you think he wants us to work with him? Like, this is a bucket list. I want to work with Greg on a project. Like, and it literally was just a bucket list project for me. Like, I didn't care what game he would allow me to work with him on. Like, if it wasn't Chicory, it was going to be something else someday. And I was so excited that it happened to be this one because it was so beautiful and so good and like so big compared to some of his other projects. I was just like, I don't know, man. I think you need us. It's just, it feels like it's too big. And if it only goes to a limited audience, like, I'll be so upset that other people didn't get to experience it. So helping out with the localization and like bringing it to PlayStation 5 and like doing all the like launch title sort of stuff that goes along with that. Like, I could do that if you want to. And I was so damn excited when he was like, yeah, let's do that. It sounds really stupid and like not very businessy, but like, I just wanted to work with Greg.
I mean, but that's like, I feel like if you find a project or a person you really like, you want to work with them, however you can make it work.
In this particular case, Greg is just so creative and like his game is charming and whimsical, but also like it talks about real stuff. And like, I really like to work with games that talk about real things.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to have teeth necessarily. Like, you don't have to like bring people down with like, Chicory, spoiler, is about imposter syndrome. But not that like, oh, you have it, but like, oh, we all have it, right? And that shouldn't block us from doing art. It shouldn't block us from the things we love because we feel like we're not good enough. The type of person that would write that story, like that's the type of person you want to work with. It just is.
Whether they're silly, intense, they all have this like connecting thread. And I even see it in games like Tunic, a game that is punishing and fun and interesting and confusing But it's still like this little character, the minute you start, you're just like, I understand, I see it. What was it like working with the creator and finding legs for that game that has now become this gigantic hit?
So the creator of Tunic is Andrew Schuldeis, and he's like this beautiful, wonderful Canadian. He lives up in Halifax, and we're always like, oh, he's just like a professor. He's got like the best voice on all podcasts. Like he's just wonderful. But the thing about Andrew that's so interesting is he's very curious, and he's obsessed with language, and he likes hiding things in plain sight. He likes the mystery of places. He likes the curiosity of trying to discover what a place is actually about or what a story is actually about. What was hardest with Tunic is obviously it wears its inspirations on its sleeve. Like there's a lot of Zelda in it. There's a lot of Dark Souls in it. There's a lot of Fez in it. What was hardest is like you're looking at these just absolute masterpieces, and you need to ensure that you're not making those masterpieces.
Right.
So it's always going into design discussions of just like, what is the most Tunic way to do something? And the most Tunic way to do something is often like kind of weird and kind of like a right turn on something, or possibly a U-turn, or a wholesale deletion of an entire area that was made and just had to be thrown away because it just wasn't right. It was not the most Tunic version of something. And like working with someone who didn't view that as like, oh, well, shit, I just wasted all this time, but more like, but now I know what we need to do. And now I'm able to like continue to sort of build this mystery and build these secrets and like continue to hide things upon layers and layers and layers and layers. There's so many layers of secrets in Tunic. And we're always like, when we look at like the audience, we're like, did they find them all yet? Have we seen all the ones that are hidden in this game? And I'm not actually going to answer that at all. But like working with a creator like that, like one, you have to be a bit on your toes all the time, but two, you have to like be able to keep up with that and also give permission. Like, yes, that is the most Tunic version of Tunic, not the most Fez version of Tunic or the most Zelda version of Tunic or the most Dark Souls version of Tunic, but the most Tunic version of Tunic, which down to like we have a no fail mode because that's the most Tunic version of Tunic. We don't want people to bounce out of the game because they don't want the punishing combat. They just want to find the secrets. And you can enjoy the game and have an incredible experience, and tons of people do. But just being like, I don't want to die that much.
Yeah.
And like that's sort of like the generosity. We use the term design generosity a lot. It's being generous with your player base. It's being generous with like your design inspiration and thoughts to like create something that's like truly lovely and like truly meant for as many people as possible. And that's just who Andrew is.
Well, and I love you mentioned the secrets, but I remember very specifically when I was playing it on Game Pass, when I first played it on PC, and there was the second or third shortcut where you can either go this long winding path or you can go around behind a cliff like a tree. And I went the full loop like twice. And then I found that secret after I'd found everything, and I went, son of a, God damn it.
Uh-huh.
But I laughed because I was like, it was right there.
Yep.
I just didn't look.
We actually, so because we're game developers, we're friends with a lot of other independent game developers or AAA developers. And over the last, it came out March 17th. So since March 17th, every week or two, we start getting text messages from friends somewhere around the world, or we get Discord messages, and they're like, oh my God, we're playing Tunic. And so I got to this one point, and I was like, nah, it couldn't possibly be that. And then I get to this other point, and I was like, oh my God, it was just right there in front of me the whole time. And then we get to another point, and that at some point in these text messages, it's like, I cannot believe you have done this. How did you possibly do this? I cannot believe you got away with that. Oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever played. And then it's like you can hear them yelling.
Yeah.
Like I have a 11 and 9-year-old at home, and like I watched it in my living room of like, especially my 9-year-old, as he figured out what the heck was going on in this game. The volume increased of like how excited he got of what he was digging out, and he didn't have any concept of like the sort of like retro nostalgia,
right,
whatever that like us grown-ups have. He was just like, oh wow, this was hidden right here. Oh wow, I couldn't believe like I went behind this thing, and there's this other thing, and I've been carrying this thing around forever, and it did this thing that I desperately needed. And like his volume would just absolutely, and he's loud anyways. It was a lot going on in my living room, and like down to like at the very end of the game, you have to do this thing that I'm not going to tell you about. And he was so excited he couldn't even do it. So like my husband Adam had to pop in and like do this whole thing, and he's just screaming and jumping beside him. Like that's so cool. And like I don't know, like watching that over and over and over again, watching it with my friends who I mean, jaded game developers, we've seen it all at this point, you know? And then, but also watching like the fans do it, it's just like, Andrew made that, and like trying to convince Andrew, like, dude, do you know what you made?
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of experiences you have? And like, he gets emails. I mean, we get several, because I get those emails as well. And it's like, for every one of these, there's like 100 or 200 people that just didn't send that email that are having this very same experience. And like, fucking kudos, my man. That's amazing. That was a really hard game to make.
It's so cool. And I'm so glad you brought up your kids, because I'm always curious, as an adult gamer who grew up playing games and now has children who are interacting in games in different ways, has that affected your philosophies for both publishing and developing?
Yes. Right from the very beginning, so Adam comes from like definitely a more hardcore gaming background. What we talk about all the time, and it actually came up in several of my meetings this weekend, sort of in the design ethos of a lot of our games that are unannounced right now, is we have like a low floor and a high ceiling. And low floors are really important when you want to invite people into our space. Like, we gatekeep a lot, like in the industry itself, like, oh, you don't belong here, you're not a real gamer. And that's like BS, because when you have a low floor, you're inviting people into the space to show people how amazing this thing is that you love. And you're giving them the ability to like learn how to play something and build the schematics to be able to play it. And then when you have the high ceiling in a game, you can invite somebody into the exact same game and they can play it in a more creative way. It's like sort of going into a fight and you're like, I'm just gonna fucking spam Fireball forever. It's like Street Fighter, you're playing Ryu and just spam and Fireball from the other side. And then you go to like Evo and you're like, no. That is not what we do, that's our high ceiling. And being able to create that sort of in all of our games, how can you play with your kid? Like, I played Wilmot's Warehouse with my child. That was horrible, because we're both organizing the exact same warehouse, and it's an absolute nightmare. It's a very different play experience, but low floor, it's chaos. Versus like our high ceiling, which is when I go in and play Wilmot's Warehouse. It is a meticulously storyboarded warehouse that we can like all put together. And that's like that idea of being able to, like, how can a parent play with their 4-year-old with a controller? And how can somebody who's been playing games for 30 years, how can we enjoy the same game? We go into every game with that approach.
There's something about what Finji does and the way that you engage with your audience. I have to imagine being back at PAX, being at PAX West especially, and getting to see people one-on-one interact with your games. There must be nothing like that.
There isn't, and it's really weird, because on one hand, I'm like, oh yeah, I was just here. I've been haunting this convention center for the last, 6 years of my life. And then on the other hand, it's like, I've been at home in Grand Rapids, Michigan, soccer momming for 2 years, wearing my pajamas and never being out and about. I got the weirdest interaction today. I was just walking around on the streets outside, sort of going to lunch, and a person was like, oh, I know you. And I was like, I mean, I work in games, so probably. And she's like, I don't know you from games, though. I don't work in games. It was at a restaurant. And I was like, I mean, you probably know me from games. She's like, are you on YouTube? And I was like, I don't know, probably. I've done interviews and stuff before. And in my brain, I'm just like, you know me from this Apple commercial I did once. And I know that's what you're thinking, but I can't tell you that because this is really embarrassing for me to have to admit to this, in public. And then I have to explain what this is and probably pull out my phone and show you. But that sort of stuff only happens when I'm traveling around for this. When I'm at home, I'm very incognito, and it's like I live in a different world than what is going on here. And that's the feeling of being back. It's like people are like, oh, I know you. I've met you before. And at home, it's like nobody knows me. Nobody's met me before. And nobody wants to talk to me because I'm just disgusting in my pajamas at school drop-off, which is quite a thing to behold. That's the thing. And then bringing them in and sitting them down and playing our games and having my devs here, which I haven't seen Sarah and Colin from Exocolonist since before the pandemic, and I haven't seen Greg. I launched a game with Greg and never got to see him, at all. We brought the game on, I didn't see him. We launched a game, I didn't see him. It's been out for a year and a half, and I haven't seen him, and that is horrible. When you think back on it, that was the worst part of this project. Is these people that I care so deeply about couldn't be in the same place as me and couldn't be in the same place as the team. We did a big dinner last night where people who have only interacted on video calls or in emails or on Slack are like, oh, hey, I know you. We did this cool thing together, and you're a real person with a face and a body in real space. That's what's so important about this show for us. And just Look at everybody at my booth. It's
Yeah.
so cool.
It's so cool. So you've mentioned Exocolonist a few times. It's one of your newer games that's on display here. Tell the listeners a little bit about what that game is.
So Exocolonist, it's not called Exocolonist, sorry. That's our internal, really fast version. I was a teenage Exocolonist. It's a narrative RPG, and you are playing as a young woman. She's 10 years old, and she just lands on a planet. She's basically born on a ship on the way to this planet. And you're playing her life from ages 10 to about 20, assuming you survive. And the important thing about Exocolonist is choices matter. So as you grow up, as this colony develops, you are going to be faced with pretty grown-up decisions. And sometimes you're looking at these through the eyes of a child, and sometimes you're looking at these through the eyes of an adult. But you're also growing up alongside all of your friends who are about the same age as you. So you can develop relationships with them. They may also participate in colonialism and fascism, and they may actually be terrible people. And the choices you make and the relationships that you develop over these 10 years are going to both push you forward as a character, but also the whole colony. And can you save your colony? Can your colony survive sort of the natural human progression of an isolated group on a planet? Or will the colony fail and everyone passes away? And at the end of that, when you go back through your wormhole and you relive that life again, how many of those memories from your first life do you take with you? And can you save it now your second life through? Exocolonist is made to be played over and over again, and you get to keep some of those memories in each next life. It's so cool. It's got this massive script. It was 500-something thousand words. The closest thing that we've been able to identify to it is something like Mass Effect, but made by this tiny team. It's like pastel Mass Effect. It has incredible sci-fi writing. A reviewer called it an empathetic narrative RPG. It's a narrative with teeth, but it gives a shit about the teeth. It's not teeth for teeth's sake. It's teeth because these people matter, and you are helping both yourself and the colony to try to survive. It's such a cool game, and I've never played anything quite like it. And you can just sink 100 hours into it because you have so many lives. It's got 29 different endings. It's 500 something story moments. It is just huge. And we somehow made it work beautifully with a controller on a Switch, which is
You're speaking my language.
so hard with something that was definitely made to be native mouse and keyboard. I was actually playing it on a Switch Lite out here because it came out last week, and I was just what does it feel like on this tiny, tiny screen? And I was just I spent a whole hour just yelling about it. Gosh, Friday night when I was talking to my husband, Adam, who helped with this part of the design, just let me tell you how amazing this is from someone who has not touched this form factor of this game before. And he's like, oh, I'm so glad you're saying this because it was a hard problem to solve. And there were 8 people working on it to make it feel like a native console and native Switch title. So I want everyone to look at it. I want everyone to play it. You have to like to read. That's my only caveat.
And what platforms is it on?
So it's out on PS4 and PS5, PC, Mac, Linux, storefronts, and also Switch.
Amazing. Bex, thank you for being so generous with your time. It is clear just from talking to you that you love games and you love sharing them. And you're so excited to be here and translate that energy to your audience. And I am grateful as a member of your audience for that energy. The show, Fun and Games, that I do, we have this ethos and a saying, happy gaming. It's this idea that there's so much negativity online. People are so shitty for no reason. And we just want to celebrate games. And so I'd love to wrap up the interview by you saying happy gaming.
Happy gaming!
All right, I am here to talk about Demon School, and I am with Brandon Sheffield. Did I get that right?
You did.
Excellent. Brandon, thank you for chatting with me.
Certainly. Happy to be here in my booth.
So I'm here to talk to you about Demon School. You are the creative director of Necrosoft. So I guess to start, just tell the listeners a little bit about what Demon School is.
Yeah, Demon School is an RPG that has kind of a simultaneous horror and friendship focus. So it's more about building friendships within a spooky, weird world, and less about blood and guts, although there is some blood and guts. And the battles are tactical. So it's kind of a tactics RPG, but it's more of an RPG with tactics battles, if that makes sense.
It does. And I got to play the demo, which I loved. And in the story demo, not only do you get to see the battle system and see the characters, but you can see a little bit of how the story and the mission system works. It has, I'm sure you must have heard this, it does have a very Persona or like Shin Megami or even like older RPG kind of like go here, do the thing kind of vibe. Is that inspirations you're pulling from your past? Are you a fan of those kinds of JRPGs and tactics RPGs?
Definitely the Shin Megami Tensei series in general is a touchstone, but there's also Yakuza in there, our kind of pacing of the content and how you get to side quests versus main quests kind of thing. It's very Yakuza influenced. There's also influence from a really old tactics RPG called Black Matrix on the Saturn and the Dreamcast. So yes, there's a lot of different, there's Valkyria Chronicles influence in there. Of course, when I say influence, I mean I played those things and thought about what I wanted to do, not necessarily it's like I'm going to make something like this.
Right.
But it was like a conversation spark for where we wanted to go. And so we hope that it feels familiar in certain ways, but not directly evocative of a Persona. It's got some, like, you won't feel out of your depth, but you won't feel like I'm playing an indie Persona now, necessarily. Unless that's what you want it to be, in which case, maybe it is.
Well, you said the magic word. I, over the pandemic, mainlined the entire Yakuza franchise from start to finish, which is one of the best decisions I ever made.
Good one.
And so I'm curious a little bit about the storytelling. Let's start with that. You mentioned that friendship is as important as the combat, and I noticed certain missions I did, I could choose which of my friends to confide in, and I would get bonuses. Now, as a fan of the Mass Effect franchise and dating aliens and dating in general, I'm curious, is it just friendship? Is there potential for things to go beyond friendship in this game? Because everyone loves a romance.
There's some dating. You can't date necessarily everybody because there are a couple folks for whom their friendship is important to me as the writer of the story.
Sure.
And so they can't date. But you could infer it if you wanted to. But there's definitely a lot of dateability going around, and everyone can date whoever. And we also have the ability for characters that are not. Let me start that over. The main character is largely who you're building relationships between with the rest of the team. But the rest of the team can also build relationships with each other. It's not as deep or complex, but they'll unlock additional little story nodes or snippets by leveling up their relationship with each other. And also their combo strength goes up as they level up with each other. So yeah, there's a lot of things going around, and there's some dating and there's some weirdness. So yeah, it should be satisfied, hopefully. Most parties should be satisfied.
I love that very much. So my next question is a little bit about the battle system. So it has a very tactics feel. If you've played just about any tactics game that came out in the last 20 years, you'll have an idea how the systems work. What's interesting here is you don't limit it by turn or by player. You can attack 4 times with one character, and that's your round. Or you can spread it out amongst the different characters in the party. Talk a little bit about that and why that was important instead of just going, I pick this character and he does a thing, and I pick this character and they do a thing.
Yeah, the kind of overarching thinking about this battle system was that I wanted to reduce the number of clicks that you have to make in tactics games, because I play a lot of tactics games, and over time it starts to feel like, why am I even here and what am I really doing? Because I'm just, you select a character, you select where they are, you confirm it, you select what kind of thing you're going to do. Okay, I'm going to attack, now I'm going to choose the direction, now I'm going to confirm it. And there's nothing wrong with it. And it has kind of like a meditative quality for me sometimes. But with this, I wanted it to be much more about straight action. So when you select a character, you really just choose a direction. You don't even need to move the cursor all the way to the end or anything like that. You just choose what direction, and if there's an enemy to attack, they'll attack it. And so as part of that, we came up with this particular action point system where the first movement that you do with one character costs 1 AP, the second costs 2, the third costs 3. And so that's how we limit you from just using one character forever, because after you've done 3, you basically can't do anything else. But if you spread it out across everybody, you can manage things really efficiently. And so it was kind of a nice push and pull for us. But I also don't like limiting people to, no, this person goes first and this person goes second and they go third. Like, I wanted you to be able to choose it in any order so that you can do combos, like knock an enemy into another friend and they do a combo together, or knock an enemy into a line so that someone else can slam through the whole line. And you couldn't do that if you couldn't choose any character at any time. So we wanted the kind of tactical battles that we were building. We really needed a lot of freedom, even though we also were limiting you in certain ways.
I really appreciate that because I'm a tactics fan who's not good at tactics. Like, I like playing those games, but I often feel overwhelmed. And what was really interesting is that the first fight I did in story mode, I got trounced and I died.
Yeah.
But then when I retried it, I paid closer attention and I started to understand where stuff was. It feels very translatable. What's also really interesting is, like, I got into a bad spot, so in the next round, I just used my healer 3 times instead of doing any attacks and saved my party. I think that this battle system just has a lot more versatility than the more rigid ones. I want to talk a little bit about the aesthetics. Obviously, this is very anime influenced. This is very pixel art influenced. Is that where, like, clearly you're pulling from places and things that we've seen out in the world before, but why pixel art? Why this aesthetic specifically?
So I really like horror movies.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I like about horror movies is when you can see the work. Not that it's bad, but like, you look at this sequence and you're like, how did they do that? Especially when they were using physical, practical effects.
Yep.
So it's like there's a scene in The Gate, which is like a children's horror movie, where these people fall down and then little demons hop up. And the way that they did that is there's actually like it's a room with a hole in it, and the people actually physically, literally fall into the hole, and then some other folks in little demon costumes jump up, and that's how they made that work. And you don't notice it.
Right.
And I love that kind of stuff, the things that make you think, how did they do this? What was their process? And so with us having sprite-based characters and 3D backgrounds and 3D effects, we're kind of influenced by like the Sega Saturn and things, where when something looks good on the Saturn, it's like they worked really hard
Right.
to make that look that way. And so our kind of effects that take up space in the world, and our 2D characters that when you skew the camera, they kind of shift. It just makes you notice that it's not fully smooth. It makes you notice the edges of things. And I like that a lot. And it really comes from the horror movie influence that there is on this game. We're influenced a lot by 70s Italian horror and Japanese horror manga like Suehiro Maruo and Junji Ito. And you can see that even in the avatars, where we have manga-style shadowing with a hashing instead of a gradient. We just have a really good pixel artist, and that's another reason why we're doing pixel art avatars, because she's just one of the best in the business at that. So,
I mean, I love the design. One of the things that was most striking to me was when I did the side mission where you're tracking down suspicious emails, and then you get ambushed. And when you get ambushed, the classroom transitions as you start the battle. The back end blows out, and like you fall into this void. I think that those transitions add an oomph to what I already love pixel art, but it just kind of, it's that 3D art that you're talking about. It kind of adds this raw horror that you feel as things transform.
Yeah, we kind of wanted it to be a bit like, we intentionally made the 3D backgrounds in an isometric framework where if you weren't paying full attention, you could assume that the whole thing was pixel art. So that then when something 3D happens and the camera moves or the wall comes down, like in that classroom, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, it is 3D, or they are doing something over here. And so, yeah, we like that kind of thing. And also in that sequence you're talking about, what's happening is the demon and human worlds are colliding, and you wind up in this liminal space between the two. And so the demons are coming through, and the humans are coming through on the other end, and you're meeting in the middle. And one of the ways that we envision this game is that demons are 3D, human world is 2-dimensional. And so, like, big bosses are all 3D.
Right.
And the reason that demons that you fight are 2-dimensional is because you're meeting in this liminal space between, and so they're getting diminished there. And so that's what we were trying to do, and it may clue you in that since all the backgrounds are 3D, like, the problem of the demon world infecting the human world is already larger than people in the game realize, because there's already 3D here, but people aren't noticing it. So that's kind of the thematic thing that we were doing with that.
That's amazing. So this is an indie title. Do you have a projected release date for this? Do you have an idea of when it's coming out and what platforms it's going to be on?
It'll be out in 2023, come hell or high water, and it'll be on Steam and all the consoles, hopefully simultaneously. That's the plan. And yeah, we just hope people like it. I mean, we've certainly worked hard on it, and we hope that people can see that and at the very least appreciate the work.
I mean, when I was playing the demo, like, all I could think was, I want to get this on my Switch. Like, any good pixel art or indie game, it's like the first console I want to play it on is the Switch. It just has that kind of vibe. Also, like, the slice of life stuff in the game feels very cozy Switch game, which is such a dichotomy to the horror, which I think adds to some of the comedy in the character writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's more spooky than horror, like I was saying, and I noticed that there are a lot of people that are really interested in horror and like it, but don't want to be scared, and they can't really watch actual horrific stuff, but they're really intrigued and they want to be able to engage with that. And that's kind of where this sits, in that space of spooky but not scary. And so I think that it should please true horror fans, because they tend to be fine with just spooky, and it should also please folks who are not, they can't get all the way to the blood and guts horror. So we'll see.
I mean, as someone who's a coward and can't really watch horror, I was very intrigued by it. I'm very excited about it. The last thing I'll have you do is, we have a saying on the show, it's happy gaming. It's this idea that as long as you're playing games that you love, we don't have to go online and kind of tear everything down. We can just enjoy the games we're playing. So if you say happy gaming, we can wrap up the interview.
All right, happy gaming.
I'm here with Brian Wilson. He works on business development for Whitethorn Games. You may know them most recently, of course, as the breakout hit Calco, where you can have your own cat cafe and ride giant cats and play with small cats. Talk a little bit about Whitethorn and kind of the ethos for publishing. Like, what do you look for in the games that you want to put out? What's kind of like the through line for when you're going out there and trying to bring games in under your umbrella?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we at Whitethorn believe games are for everyone. We want them to be accessible and as playable as possible. So our 3 core pillars are, bite-sized, low stress, and approachable. That doesn't mean they can be, we don't care if they're longer, but if you can sit down and play for a little bit, they respect your time. You can play in short bursts. We want anyone and everyone to be able to play, whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old, and just something that respects your time. I mean, people are running out of time these days, so being able to get a good quality experience in a short chunk of time is what we're striving for.
One could say that Whitethorn kind of fits into the cozy game revolution, especially Calco, which is a game that a friend of mine streamed for hours and hours. It just seems like a good, lighthearted, kind, warm experience. Right. Is that kind of the goal? Do you want to kind of have these more uplifting and positive experiences?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to play video games. I think people are the technology and goal is games are about, I mean, everything and anything right now. So I miss the days when you kind of turn something on, play it, bright colors, fun, had a good time, and you could set it down. It's not a job. It's not demoralizing. You know, if you kill someone, they're not gonna, you know, remember it, and their dog will lay by the grave. Like, I think we've really pushed it too far, and we just want fun, happy, colorful stuff.
Talk a bit about the process of bringing games under your wing. Do you guys go looking for developers and creators that fit the ethos? Do they come to you? Like, what's that process like?
Yeah, for the scouting process, we receive a lot of, you know, inbound emails and pitches, dozens and dozens and dozens a week. As the scout, I also go out and really search online, travel across the world to find, you know, the newest and latest games. And then we meet somewhere in the middle. Developers have to want to work with us, and we want to work with them. If we're going to do it over the course of a few years, we want to have that good, strong relationship, and just makes for a better end product.
If you had advice for up-and-coming indie developers, the core tenets or a kind of specific thing that you're really looking for when you look at these games, what would that be?
It's a good question. I think if you're a really new developer, it's really good to have released a game before. It's not necessary, but you learn so much from that process as I've gone through it myself. Even if it's something small that you release, self-publish and release on Steam, you will understand this process from start to finish, and you'll know what you need next time. It just makes it better. You'll learn so much. You'll learn how to finish a game. Games are really hard to make, and finishing them is even harder.
Talk about the origins of Whitethorn. How did you guys get into publishing? What was the kind of thing that brought you to want to get into this space in this way?
Yeah, so the founder, Matt White, actually lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, teaching and saw all these amazing students and creators kind of have to leave the city because there were no opportunities within it. He left to go to PlayStation California, and then came back with just the goal of like, man, I really want there to be a hub for, you know, me to help release games, and seeing all this talent have to leave the city, so maybe I can kind of create something in it for people to stay. So it kind of started all with that, just like, you know, based on students and younger creators.
That's great. I think it's really important to give smaller games the opportunity to breathe and grow. The indie scene has become some of my favorite games of all time. When you're looking to play an indie game, you turn the scout mind off, you just want to relax. Do you tend to lean into the same kind of games that you guys release, or do you go kind of in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I try to play everything as a scout. Everyone has their personal favorites. I just like something that I can just play. I don't know, I personally love stuff with motion that is, you know, gravity, and like maybe a snowboarding kind of game, or just, I don't know, something that scratches that itch with just, it keeps moving and flowing. But everyone has their favorites, and that's something to keep in mind when scouting for the portfolio, is that like all of our games are so different. But we can maybe spiderweb, where if you're a fan of Calico, you can stay within the ecosystem because we have a game that has those same pillars. So it's different from Calico, but still has those, you know, same roots that, you know, our customers love.
What is the game with the smallest amount of work on it that you've brought on? Has there ever been a game that like was just, you know, scripts or just like pictures or animatics, but like, have you ever brought in a game that wasn't even completely a game yet?
Yeah, we signed a game that did not have a playable build yet, and that's usually pretty rare, but we love the work they did in the past and kind of had a lot of pitch material letting us know where they were going, and we just trusted them and, you know, signed it from the start. It's happened before, but it's not super common. Usually you need something to play, you need something to, you know, go off of. But as a scout, you basically, when developers are pitching, they're trying to de-risk the situation. So when I receive pitches, I have like a wall up. So they're trying to de-risk it by, you know, the game itself. Maybe if they've never shipped a game before, they have a producer, which lets me know that they will actually get shipped. They have they've done their homework, that sort of thing. So then that wall comes lower and lower. So it's different for every game.
Is there a game in your catalog right now of upcoming and current release that you're most excited for? I know they're your babies. I know you brought them all in. But is there one that you personally to play are really excited for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but the Forest Cathedral is, something pretty different for us. Also Recall. I mean, they're all good. I can't pick.
Talk a little bit about why the Forest Cathedral is so different from the rest of your catalog.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of gameplay. It's something we've done as players for a long time. It's a mix of 2D platforming and kind of this dynamic 3D environment. So we've played those kind of games for a long time, but never meshed as one. It's actually a little bit harder. It's a little more challenging for Whitethorn, but in-house we have a usability and accessibility person, Britt Dye, who's really helped us make the game more accessible and playable. If 2D platforming is not your thing, you can, have different options to make it more accessible so you can kind of get right past it. Games are for everyone, and we want them, to be just played and enjoyed by as many people as possible.
I appreciate that sentiment of games are for everyone. A lot of what Fun and Games is founded on is this idea of celebrating games, trying to put positive energy out there. There's a lot of negativity online for gaming. And so what I think I like most about Whitethorn is that is immediate from moment one when you play any of your games, that there's this genuine love and passion for gaming in them. Right. I'm curious if there are any standout moments in these games that really stick with you. I remember the first time I watched my friend AOL play Calico and got on a cat while holding a cat while wearing a cat. It's just things like that really stand out and make these games memorable. Are there any moments playing any of these games that you're like, oh, this is a thing that really hooked me, or kind of something that I really love and look forward to other people experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I think every game has its hook and every game has its audience. That's a perfect example for Calico. I believe I've said that exact same thing where it's a kid's game and that's a huge audience that, people kind of have forgotten about a little bit, that, not every game is for a 35-year-old white guy, and that, there are 10-year-olds out there. So having little kids and the younger audience walk up and see Calico and be like, I'm going to play that and love it and dress as the characters. And we can visually see oh, that person's a Calico fan. And that's just amazing to see. I think that's something we strive on as a publisher with our brand that sets us apart. And we're just going to keep it going in that direction.
Talk a little bit about what it was like to be a publisher during the pandemic. Calico really did find its footing during the pandemic, but talk about what that was like, and then what it's like to now be back in the booth, back on the floor, doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic was obviously hard for everyone involved, and everyone's personal lives and work lives in the industry or outside of. But something it took away from us was just in-person events, and that's something we, smaller publishers and individual creators, lived on. If you can't make it out and have nowhere to go, you're kind of competing with everyone online. So everyone, there have been online events and online conventions to try to supplement that, but it just doesn't have the same energy that we can literally feel here. So that was a huge thing that it took away from us, but obviously we're happy it's back.
Yeah. I think there's something core to PAX more than any other convention, that it really is just FaceTime with your audience, and you get feedback, you get critique. Has there ever been times where someone's playing a game and they're like, oh, I don't really like this, or this thing doesn't seem to work, that has helped the core of these games grow?
Yeah, it's interesting to see and watch people play, how people play. Luckily we bring them here where they're to a level, polished state where, we know almost everything about them instead of the developers. So it's unfortunate we run into bugs and things like that. But, as a developer, and when our developers here who make the games watch, it is interesting to kind of get that, real world experience before the game is out and see people may play the game a little bit different than you intended.
Well, Brian, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I'm really excited for the future of Whitethorn. The games that you're putting out are really incredible because every aesthetic fits with each other, yet they all stand out. They all feel different. They feel unique, and that's so important in a really good publisher. Before we go, we have a saying on the show, which is happy gaming. It's this idea, like I said before, that we celebrate the good, the positivity in gaming. So if you could say happy gaming, we'll wrap up the interview.
Happy gaming.
I'm here with Celia Schilling over at Yacht Club Games. I just got to demo both Mina the Hollower and Shovel Knight Dig. Thank you for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, thank you for hanging out. It's been so much fun.
So I'm really excited for both of these games because I'm just a super fan for Yacht Club. I want to start with Mina. Obviously, you guys debuted with a huge round of applause digitally, Kickstarter, tons of backers, people really excited for this game. What was it like in quarantine pretty much to launch a Kickstarter for this game and what the reception was like for it?
It was absolutely phenomenal. The team worked really hard on getting everything together. We worked together on announcing with the presents. We worked with our good friend Gerard to help bring it, public on G4. Like the team, I was writing up all the content to make sure that it was the best experience possible, and just to see the positive response absolutely immediately once we announced it just really warmed our hearts because we were super excited about it, and we know that we're known as the Shovel Knight people, and it was a brand new IP, and we're like, we hope you love Mina as much as we do, and it was just so great to see.
Talk a little bit about this demo now that's available at the show floor. It's a first time available to the public, but you were demoing this when you made the announcement. You had a little playable thing for folks. Talk about what it's like now to have such a larger amount of people to get their hands on this and what the reaction's been like.
It is so cool, and I'm learning new things about the game every time I see people play it. I've had my hands on it for months, and I think it's something truly special to be able to see it live and see how people's eyes light up when they discover new secrets in the game as well. It's just been really fun, and it just makes me even more excited. So when we have the final release of the game, to have it out in the world and have everyone get their hands on it.
For people who are not familiar, Mina is this kind of mashup of Castlevania and Bloodborne and even Legend of Zelda. Is this born out of just being fans over at Yacht Club and loving all these kinds of games and seeing what kind of thing you can mix together?
So at Yacht Club Games, we don't only want you to love our games, but we want to make games that make you love gaming. So we took different aspects of inspirations of games that really made us fall in love with games as kids and young adults and mash it together into something spectacular. And so, yeah, it's a love letter to one of our favorite handhelds of all time, the Game Boy.
Yeah, the Game Boy Color design is really incredible. It reminds me of when I first got my hands on Shovel Knight. This idea of it looks like something that could run on those old systems, but definitely could not tech-wise. How does that, working within those restrictions, motivate the team, make you push harder and do really cool things that you might not otherwise be able to do?
So please keep in mind that we do have a little bit cheaty aspects to the game, but being faithful and having that reminiscent aesthetic really gives us new inspirations on how to accomplish things using those limitations. And it's been so fun to see what we can do and to finagle different things to make it even better.
So now Mina obviously doesn't have a release date quite yet. I would love for it to be sometime next year. I'm optimistic about that, but who knows?
I would love it to come out tomorrow, but
obviously.
We're not ready.
But talk a little bit about that and that process of trying to understand how you tell people when something's coming, but also you don't want to reveal or miss a mark or not be ready. Is that constant in negotiation when you're working on a game like this to try and figure out when it's ready to tell the public and how you get to that point?
Okay, so for Yacht Club Games, we don't like to give you a release date until we're confident on when we can release the game.
Right.
Because people are so excited about the game. We're incredibly excited about it. And it's oh, it'll come out this date. And it's oh, well, we want to add even more content, so we're going to push it back. And I would say that our Achilles heel is that though we have a production schedule, our team is so passionate and so excited. We're coming up with new ideas every single day. So the problem with that is sometimes we're not sure when to put the creative pen down. So it can take a little while. But I promise fans and the community and everyone around, even you, that it'll be absolutely fantastic once it's ready.
I love, though, this idea that once you know it's ready and you can make an announcement. I want to transition a little bit to Shovel Knight Dig.
Yes.
Just launched an incredible commercial with a couple of dorks in dress up. Talk about how that excitement when you're ready to push that kind of marketing and get the word out that this game is ready and we want to share it with you.
Oh man, it was fantastic. And keeping it a secret was so difficult. Because all my friends would be like, hey Celia, what are you working on? And I was like, can't tell you, but it's really cool. And the thing that was really cool is that to the team, I had to pitch, hey, we're going to do a live action trailer. And we're getting our good buddy Gerard, who's known on G4 and also on YouTube as the completionist, and Aaron from the Game Grumps into this really fun skit to announce the game. And basically, before we even started that, the team gave me the green light to start working on the release date for it. And so I have the date in mind. Everything's set in stone. So let's, hit the ground running with it.
I love that. And is there a delay between when you, because there must be constant discussion about, well, this is the goal, we have an idea, and then you can make an official public announcement. And it must be tricky to work those timelines and understand, because you want it to be ready. Like you said before, you don't want to get stuck. So is it always constant conversation between marketing and the rest of the team to figure out when's the right moment to announce these things?
We're definitely very conscious about it. The cool thing about Yacht Club Games, which is unique to our studio, is that everyone has a hand in anything that they're interested in. For example, like when we're writing the narrative, like I'm allowed in those meetings. They're allowed, when they're writing the narrative, they're also allowed to be in the marketing meetings. We all have a hand in it. So we're all consciously aware where in the development cycle everything is. And what's awesome, since we're such a small team, I can literally turn over to Shannon or like another colleague or Michael and be like, hey, producer, like what's going on? When's the timeline? I can't remember in this moment. So we're pretty tight knit. So we have a full conversation with the team of when it makes most sense, not only for the team, so they can casually work on the game and like no one's rushed, but we also have a final product that's absolutely polished and we're all ready to announce it.
It's so exciting. It's also been exciting ever since the mid-life cycle of Shovel Knight. It seems like y'all are always working on things simultaneously. You're about to release another game. I have to imagine other things in the pipeline. You must be working on something. Is that always the constant method of like, once the one thing's done, we want to move on to the next thing, we want to create, come up with ideas?
Oh man, okay, the ideas do not stop. We have so many jokes of games that we want to see, and wouldn't it be cool if we did this and that? And I don't know, I want Shovel Party 64 to come out eventually too. That'd be cool. Or Shovel Cart, or I don't know, Mina's Pizza Party Adventure. I don't know. It'll be a cool cooking game. She's really good at making pizza.
Awesome.
Anyways, so for that, yeah, we're constantly working on things. Like right now, besides focusing on Shovel Knight Dig and working on Mina, an internal project that I can't talk about, we're also working on Pocket Dungeon. We recently announced that we're releasing DLC, so we're working with Vine on that. We're also projecting to like other things, and we're constantly moving about what exactly we want to do, and we're just always so pumped. So can't stop, won't stop, Shovel Knight forever.
I just love this idea that the passion that we feel playing these games is so apparent in the studio. It's clear that you all love games. Is there? Obviously, I can't ask you to pick a favorite game from Yacht Club because that would be unfair to you. But is there a game that you've put an embarrassing amount of hours into?
Yes. Okay, so even before I worked at Yacht Club Games, I was a Shovel Knight fan. In my interview, they're like, have you played the Shovel Knight games? And I was like, well, no, I've dabbled in Shovel Justice just a little bit. But for it, I would have to say Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. I am casually addicted to the game. It's that one more round feeling, and I love puzzle games. I love roguelikes, and that being mashed together, taking everything we love about falling block puzzles and going in and on that adventure was so much fun. And just the story, I don't want to spoil too much, but it definitely is charming and really touches for a personal level. So I'm addicted to that game. I have 100 hours plus. I had the world record for a little bit on it. On the not the full game, but for plays. I had 26 seconds until Dan the VP beat me. But yeah, I played it. I'll get him. I'll get back to it.
I want to talk about, in the marketing side, what it's like to work with partners. You guys have published games, non-Shovel Knight related games at all. You've done great work with and partnered with other studios. How is that process different from doing things internally?
So there's always different, I guess, for example, time zones.
Right.
Working with Arne, he's the creator of Cyber Shadow. He's also known as Mecha Skull. So working with him, I'd have to get up either at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. We start work at 10 a.m., but sometimes I get a little sleepy. So we'd have to coordinate with his schedule to make sure that he's not staying up too late, so we can coordinate and see how to make sure to have his vision. The cool thing about Yacht Club Games with working with Arne or Vine or Nitrome is that we like to keep visions and also keep up communication, especially since we have those time zones. But what's awesome about it is that, like them, I feel like we're the same birds of a feather because we're all passionate about what we're doing. So we have that same wavelength. So everything just feels like it's like synergy. It just makes sense, and it's just fun.
It's amazing. Let's talk about Dig a little bit. So that's coming out this month. By the time you're hearing this episode, it might already be out. It's coming out towards the end of September. Talk a little bit about what the excitement's been around this game now that we're finally coming to the end. I mean, it feels like it's been in development for several years, and there was excitement since day one. People wanted it within minutes. And so talk about coming to the end of that road and finally being able to give the complete game to the public.
Oh, we're so excited. Nitrome's excited. I feel like there's high fives all around. Good job, guys.
So we announced the game in 2019. A few things happened in between, obviously.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little couple things, things happen. But the thing is, though, is we've been working closely with Nitro. It's been over 3 years, almost 4 now, that we've been working on the game, and we're just so excited to get it in people's hands. For the game, it's going to be releasing on Nintendo Switch, on Steam, and on Apple Arcade. And it's a full-fledged adventure. And I'll give a little hint, we are looking to expand the platform roster post-launch. So if you don't have the title on your console or whatever in the future might come out, we're definitely looking into things, and we'll be sure to have more announcements about it once we have more ironed out details.
Now, an important question for me, a fan of Amiibo and plushies. Mina is going to come out eventually. I would love a Mina plushie. Obviously you guys have great t-shirts, buttons, and other things. Is part of the marketing plan always creating these awesome swag and these awesome things that people can pick up in the store?
So for marketing, typically marketing doesn't focus on that. Yeah. Luckily, I wear a lot of hats. So I have my hands in licensing too. So cameos as well as merchandise, I am a part of that process. So I rest assured, we're definitely going to be working with partners for items that are focused for release. A caveat on that, though, is that the items that we announced for our Kickstarter backer tiers are special. So though there's a plushie for that, a different plushie will be ready for everyone else come release.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the cameos, actually, because I feel like Shovel Knight has been in literally everything. Every game. He's custom armor and things. He's an assist trophy. How do you feel about those relationships? And it must be really exciting when other companies are like, can we put your character in our game?
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. And it's really cool to see Shovel Knight in so many different universes. I loved seeing him in Ukulele.
One of my favorite cameos.
Yes, oh my gosh, it's so cool. He's even made the bridge into Arby's. It was a kids' meal toy in North America, including Canada for a little while. And that was so cool too. Oh my gosh, we laughed so much doing that. But also his music was in shapes and beats. There's just so many different ways to experience Shovel Knight in so many different universes. And it just really it's really cool to see him in just new adventures and making new friends.
It's really fun to see where Shovel Knight has gone. I mean, it felt like it was this lifetime of just having Shovel Knight around. It feels like something from my childhood, even though it's not, because it's been around so long. And now it's so exciting that Mina is coming in as a brand new IP, personality all her own. And it's just exciting to see now that we've seen the longevity of Shovel Knight and how much the fans have loved it. It seems like Mina is just as beloved already in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, she's so cute. I love her. But she's definitely hollowed into our hearts as well, and we hope she burrows into yours soon. We can't wait to get Mina into your hands as soon as possible. But until then, I would say check out our social media pages, because whenever the team says it's okay for me to throw a screenshot or a GIF or make a silly joke about Midden, the funny stinky guy, I definitely post it all around.
Of all of the games have you had a chance to walk the show floor at all?
A little bit. I've been looking around being okay, tomorrow's my day to walk the show floor and play the heck out of games. I'm a huge indie fan, so I just want to see what all the other studios are doing and make my list of games I'm going to buy. So I'm excited.
Amazing. There's a lot to see here. The excitement is palpable around this booth. The line wrapped around the booth constantly. I'm so glad that you guys are here. I'm so glad that we're all here in physical space again. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. My last question is, if there was a pie-in-the-sky partnership that you could do with any of your characters, where would you want to see Mina or Shovel Knight? Is there a place that you would love to just be I can't believe we got that partnership?
Oh man, that's very difficult, because I feel I have a laundry list of okay, so this is kind of silly, but I would love to see Shovel Knight in a dance game, some DDR, going with Jake Kaufman's music, jamming out maybe to the Pocket Dungeon soundtrack or the Dig, because it's really good, and just jamming out to that. Alec, who's the director of Mina the Hollower, and myself are huge DDR fans, so I want that. Oh my gosh, it's really difficult. So yeah, that one right now. I'll get back to you. I'll give you the list later on.
Amazing. I mean, I love that idea. I mean, it's kind of like the Mario Mix version of DDR for GameCube, seeing the characters dancing on screen. It would just be so fun. I think the King Knight would be a great dancer.
Oh, I think so too, but I hope he's really bad at it and he won't admit it.
I mean, that's his MO.
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, Celia, thank you for chatting with me. The last thing I'll have you do is we have a sign off on the podcast, and it's happy gaming. It's this idea that gaming can be a negative space, especially online, but we just want people to enjoy games, have fun, and be a part of the excitement of all of these new games. So if you could say that, we'll close out the interview.
Happy gaming?
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am chatting with the incredible Chris King.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And you are the game director. You are the director of both 20XX and 30XX.
That's right.
So you're here showing 30XX. You're showing the newest update. You guys are still in early access. Talk a little bit about why this game is special. What is unique about this game?
Sure. Honestly, there's so many things that are kind of unique about this game. I think we've really nailed the kind of super crisp controlling action platformer combat that you love from. It's the game controls as well as you remember those games controlling from when we were kids. Because if you go back and play them now, like obviously they still control very well, but with modern technology, you can get such faster like input timings than you ever could back then. That like especially with like VSync off, it just feels like you're kind of controlling the game with your mind. Anyway, I'm really proud of the fact that we've made this really crisply, like satisfying action platformer gameplay with just enough of the roguelikeness to keep it fresh, to keep the player thinking about their decisions while also kind of executing perfectly and swiftly and just feeling that like flow state of playing one of these kinds of games, while also sort of making it very co-op friendly so you can play with a buddy either online or local. Honestly, you think about what makes it unique, I think it's so many little things that kind of come together at once. You know, we obviously like have a very obvious, clear Mega Man style inspiration there. And we just think we've really executed on kind of that core promise very, very, very well, while adding a whole lot of extra replayability and adaptability and sort of fun extra ways to interact with the game that wasn't really in those sort of old inspired titles.
So now 30XX is in early access on Steam. You are no stranger to that. You did that with 20XX as well. Talk a little bit about how that process feels different from what you see your peers going through with just doing create and release. And why do you think that this benefits 20XX and 30XX?
Oh, it's of course, you're almost asking me like why a fish is in the water. So like one of the things we do here at Battery Staple that's like a very vital part of our creative process is, you know, so my skill as a designer, I don't walk into a white padded room and walk out with a magnum opus. I build some, you know, scrappily done things that I think sound pretty fun. And then I go to my fan base and my friends and say, hey, I think this is pretty fun. Do you guys think this is pretty fun? Talk to me about what you like and don't like and help me iterate and make this thing better. And our early access community specifically is such a huge part of our like design and iterative process. Like with 20XX, we were, 20XX started development in the middle of 2012. Went to early access around Thanksgiving 2014. Middle of 2013 or so. We were in early access for like 15 or so, we're in development pre-early access for about 15 months. Went to early access and then proceeded to be there for 2.5 years. And the reason we were there for so long is that every time we'd hit a major milestone with the scope we thought the game had, we'd get another influx of fans, which both meant another influx of, you know, sort of capital to keep the thing going without losing everything I own. But also new perspectives, new feedback that really helped us inform the way that we wanted to kind of continue to push the game in the future. And so for us, especially with this kind of replayable title, it was never a surprise that we were going to do the exact same thing here. So we've been in early access for about 1.5 years. We continue to ship, so we're very attentive, very serious early access devs. There is an update clock right there on the game's title screen that says, you know, here's the exact number of seconds until we update. And like every 3 weeks, like clockwork, we push a new update for the game, and I kind of spend a chunk of the evening kind of looking at fan reactions, like what have we done? Because we have both like really dedicated fans who play every single update and tell me what they think immediately. But at any given point in time, you know, it's an early access game. We know there's gonna be kind of people going in and out. There's always kind of a bunch of new player perspectives I haven't seen yet about kind of what we're working on. So every single time we push an update, we kind of get this immediate feedback and just kind of keep the ear open. And like if we have a special skill as developers, it's something we do really well. Like we take it very seriously. Like I listen to every piece of feedback I can get my hands on, you know, basically no matter how it's messaged, as long as there's no like hate speech. I don't have any room for that, obviously. Like fuck that noise. Pardon my language. I don't know if I curse on podcast. Yeah. But you know, we've gotten a lot of, as an example here, we've gotten a lot of really lovely is the wrong word. We've gotten a lot of really meaningful feedback from fans who like kind of talk shit, who are like angry about something, because so often it comes from like, it kind of like originates from a place of love. And it's not at all an excuse for, you know, being shitty or using bad language or being non-diplomatic at all. But as a developer, my goal is to, so that feedback, the information that I can glean from that feedback is fuel for my business machine. It is fuel for the game I'm making. It will help me hone and make the most crisply controlling, perfectly based thing that I can. And if I'm unable to take that important feedback because I don't want to listen to them because of the way they said it, at the end of the day, I'm the one losing. And so it's really important for me to be able to kind of read feedback kind of emotion agnostically and say, look, this guy's really angry because this thing isn't the way he's expecting it. And, a lot of the time, there's no individual, like one specific fix, one angry fan, you immediately fix something. But a lot of the time, I'm going to say, I think this guy really has a point. So as an example, there's a perfect example of this. This happens very infrequently, so it really stuck out in my mind. Yesterday, here at the show, a guy came by who was a big fan of 20XX and literally wanted to talk to me for 15 minutes about why he didn't like 30XX. There were a lot of things we're doing differently. Obviously, anytime you make changes, updates, you can't please everybody, right? There are always sort of fans, unfortunately, that kind of are inadvertently sacrificed in the name of, making changes to either try and reach a wider audience or sort of more completely fulfill the vision that I'm shooting for the game. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it, right? So this guy comes by, he wants to talk to me for 15 minutes about the things he doesn't like about 30XX. And while a lot of it was kind of okay, I kind of get it now. There was one thing he said that I thought was actually really specifically poignant, was that he didn't really like. So one of the things 20XX does is its level design is way simpler. It is objectively, 30XX's level design is way better. I'm very confident in saying that as the person who does not do the level design myself. But in 20XX, one thing we very specifically do is we sort of the only kind of differentiation the game does as it's building a level in blank chunks is that it always alternates between a platforming light combat heavy sequence and a combat light platforming heavy sequence. And so this guy's point was that I felt that there was a very kind of natural difficulty cadence in 20XX that's not present in the current game because it's less likely to do that deliberately, because for most players, the combat sections are easier than the platforming or the other way around. So for most players, that kind of natural flip-flopping made for a natural difficulty cadence, even though that wasn't really my intent. And so when I heard that, I thought, well, shit, that's a really good point. I kind of want to think about that for a little while now, because there's a lot of stuff that I can do based on the way that 30XX works to kind of more manually enforce that. Because I can absolutely, that's definitely something that I can work on. The gears sort of start turning in your head and you say I can totally take what I've got and the way this currently works, and I could maybe look at tweaking this a little bit differently or turning that up. And that could be really cool. So a guy came to shit talk my game for 15 minutes, and because I was willing to hear him out, I walked away from it with data that I can use. And that's what I do every single day.
I mean, you're touching on something that's so important to our podcast. We want to celebrate games. Online communities can be so toxic, especially Twitter. And the celebration of bringing actual fans together in a physical space, I think, is unrivaled to anything else.
Oh, yeah. Wait, what's the question there?
There's no question. I just mostly sharing in your celebration of this.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I'm incredibly proud of the communities that we built around the game. There's a lot of we do know deliberate, we're building a community for the sake of building a community. We happen to have ended up with a relatively kind, caring, helpful community for newcomers, almost entirely by, I want to say, chance. I think I know that to a third-party observer, for me, it feels like chance because this is the life I live and I'm me every day. I try really freaking hard to be kind of accepting of everybody's opinions about my work, no matter where they're coming from, kind of dovetailing off of what I was talking about a moment ago. And I try to, really enforce civility, kindness, treat other people with, respect and tolerance if they, obviously, again, no hate speech, none of that. But in general, tolerance for opinions that aren't yours are something that we prize very highly, because not only do I think they make for better communities in general, but they literally make my game better. There's a very real business purpose for that. And so I think that's kind of, I want to say, and I hate to say it because it sounds like maybe I'm tooting my own horn a little, I think we have built a kind, caring community, because the community kind of follows my example. And I try to set a very strong example there. And so they say, this dev is nice, I want to be nice.
I mean, and I think that's really important. Now, 20XX isn't available in a ton of places. It started on Steam, it started in early access, now you can play it on Switch and all other places. Is there the same kind of trajectory for 30XX?
Probably, yes. So right now, Steam Early Access, we've been telling people that 1.0 is probably sometime within the next 12 months. That's not a promise. We're very careful about making promises we don't think we can keep, or at least that we're not absolutely 100% certain that we can keep. When we get to 1.0, it is very, very likely that at least one console comes along for the ride. We don't know which one or ones yet. We certainly have theories internally, but one of the weird things of the industry is just the announcement of what console something is coming alongside is kind of a big deal. So we're very careful about not talking too much about it. We obviously love the fact that 20XX is out on as many platforms as it is at this point. But I think it's given a lot of different players the opportunity to experience the love that we put into the project for so long. We hope to eventually do the same for 30XX, but the ordering there is totally up in the air.
Right, I know. And what I love about the early access model is that people can just get their hands on the thing. Some of my favorite games over the years are these games that I come to shows like this. Yeah. The dev goes, here's an early access code, go try it. Yeah. I got to do at PAX East a game called Eurogun, which is this mech shooter that it's like a twin stick shooter. Sure. I was on the floor, they gave me a code, I was able to put it on my Steam Deck when I got upstairs and run through it. Amazing. And just try it. And then go back downstairs the next day and go, I played it, I loved this. This was really weird. Do you know that this happened? It's just that kind of back and forth. Do you find that you get that kind of feedback, especially here now with the accessibility to get on Steam, on laptops and Steam Decks?
1,000,000%, all the time, yes. The exact experience that you have just described happens to us all the dang time.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that you have this 12-month-ish runway that you anticipate at some point 1.0 will come out. Somewhere in that. Talk a little bit about the ramp up to that and that kind of process. Is there a pressure to get there because you know this is the big one, right? This is when it becomes a full release? Or is this just another patch, another goal, and you don't view it any differently as the process along the way?
It's interesting. My answer is not either or. We are taking it very, very seriously. So we know that it is overwhelmingly likely that our 1.0 release will be the biggest individual visibility beat the game ever receives. It is overwhelmingly likely that that's the case. Thankfully, we're not, there's pressure there to make sure that we do it right and take it seriously. There's not pressure to release at a specific certain time or anything. We're really insanely fortunate. The fact that we get to make games, we've been doing this for 10-ish years now. The fact that we're still here, the fact that it's still financially viable is something I'm thankful for every single day. And we're doing well enough that we don't have to be too financially worried about when 1.0 is. We know as long as we're open with the community about what we're working on, we update the game every couple of weeks, just like we promised to do. At that point, the fans are really cool with knowing that 1.0 will come when our vision for the game meets kind of our 1.0 standard, because they kind of trust us to kind of make that decision. And so while there's no pressure about 1.0, it is something, it's going to be the most important beat of the game. We're going to make sure basically that we take all of the appropriate steps and care to make sure that that's as big as possible, because at the end of the day, the future content for 30XX, so we want to continue to make content for 30XX for a very long time. Basically, as long as it is financially viable for us to do so, we intend to, which means kind of the size of the game's long tail and how much money we make for it down the road always depends on how big 1.0 is, because it's always there's a big spike and then kind of your tail is usually some percentage of that spike forever. In a lot of cases. Obviously, it's not every game. Some games blow up way after the fact, but the vast majority of games are kind of like that on Steam. And so we want to make sure that basically at all costs, that's as sizable, as well received as possible, which means both the combination of making sure the product is damn ready to go as much as it possibly could be, and then kind of really taking the right amount of breathing room and time to figure out what the right megaphone for release is. So once we finish that up, we basically figure out, okay, now that we've got this, now that we know it's ready, now that it's sort of lived up to all of our goals for 1.0, now from here, where's the right megaphone for us to partner with to make the biggest splash possible? It might be a platform holder announcement. It might be one of the big showcases coming up. Who knows? Could be any of that stuff. But for us, we make sure we secure the biggest thing possible, then we release, try and do the best we can.
So now, a little bit to add on to that, you're talking about this tail and wanting to develop and improve this game forever, ideally if that works out. Yeah. Have there been any ideas or discussions? You've done 2 Mega Man X-style, awesome platform games, shooters, roguelikes. You're a creative person like I am. You have 1,000 ideas at once. I do. Is there any kind of other game you would like to make? Have you had ideas for other kinds of homages or even just original ideas that you would love to dive into if you had the time and the budget after this?
I feel like so far in this lovely chat, I've done a really detailed job of explaining certain things that I've talked about, which makes me very comfortable giving you a giant bullshit cop-out answer and saying we have a million ideas, but none that we're ready to talk about right now. It is possible we stay in action platforming. It's possible we stay in 2D. It's in our bones. We understand it. This is something we know so well, and we love working on and making more of. But maybe it'll be time for us to branch out. It's too early to tell. It's very likely that after we finish 30XX, finish, who even knows what finish means first? After we are ready to begin a new project, either because that 30XX is mostly sunset, or because we've kind of built a live ops team for 30XX and have them keep working on stuff while we spin up new projects. By the time we get there, it's pretty likely we enter a pretty detailed prototyping phase where we kind of throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what works. We have 10 ideas, but we know that once we pull that trigger, we're going whole hog. We are going as deep into one of these ideas as we possibly can, because it's just kind of what we do. So we want to take this sort of time to spec out what that's going to look like up front, play with a bunch of stuff, kind of figure out both like what's the most fun thing we've made, what's the, basically balancing amount of fun with like marketability of genre, and how much is it going to cost us to make this, and do we have the right team members for the job, how much staffing do I have to do, basically spinning a million plates to figure out, like, out of all this stuff, what really sings to us. And at the end of the day, I both fear, love, and am concerned about, probably I'll just make the thing I want to make. Like, I'm going to do a very, very detailed business analysis on all of the options in front of me. It's really like, that game looks dumb as shit and I want to make it. So here we go. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, for a cop-out answer, that was a pretty detailed cop-out answer.
I was about to say, I was pretty sure I was going to say nothing, and I was like, I can do a little better than, I can give you a really detailed nothing. Yeah.
But I understand that, right? I mean, we're all always working constantly, but you don't want to look past what you're currently working on, right? Because it's not done yet.
I also don't want to, I'm always thinking about what's next. It's always like kind of at the back of my mind, and especially as we get closer and closer to releasing 30XX, it becomes more and more important. But I certainly don't want to fall deeply in love with a new project while this one still has a lot to go.
Yeah.
I'm a game monogamist here, I suppose. I just want to make sure that I've like really done 30XX the service it really needs before like giving my whole heart to whatever's next.
Well, I mean, it's similar to any other kind of art, music, movies. You don't want to be promoting the next album while the previous album still has life. You're releasing singles, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Talk a little bit about creating in a pandemic versus when 20XX, there wasn't a pandemic. It was a different situation. Were those games, do they have benefits, minuses based on the way they were created? Or do you think that you were able to kind of flow from one thing to the other without losing a lot of speed?
It was a very natural flow for us. So Battery Staple is a very like geographically distributed team. So I'm local in this area as of like right before the pandemic. I was like, oh great, I'm gonna move up to Seattle. I got a bunch of games industry friends. I'm gonna make a bunch of friends, and then like we ground really hard to make sure that we got 20X or 30XX announced properly at East 2020. And I was like, all right, I'm getting on the flight home. I'm going to turn my industry acquaintances into friends. This is going to be dope as hell. And then the world shut down. I'm here, our art director, Glauber, is in Sao Paulo. We have a couple of guys in Germany. We have our composer, Brandon, over there, is in Atlanta. Our level designers in Boston. We're all over the dang place, which means when COVID hit, we didn't have additional problems to deal with because we were already remote. Obviously, that's not to say that developing over COVID was pleasant or didn't suck giant balls, because it was very hard. But it was very hard because of the personal struggles that COVID kind of inflicted on each of us as individuals, and not because it really changed the way we work. It was a hard time to live, not a hard time to work.
I love that. And I love that you seem to have this attitude of you just want to approach the problem head on. You want to just push through, and you're dedicated to your work in a way that I see a lot of other indie studios just dedicated and passionate. It's clear you're a fan of games. Just our conversation during the demo, you like video games.
I do. It turns out I like video games.
So I'm curious, has there been any games that you've gotten to play this year that really kind of opened your mind like, oh my God, I can't believe this is possible, or I didn't even think of this, look how cool this thing is?
All right, so in general, I am a pretty bad indie developer when it comes to playing a lot of smaller titles. I tend to get sucked into WoW. I love Path of Exile. I have a lot of respect for everything that goes on there. Obviously, all the fucking shit at Blizzard this year, not included. I think a lot of lovely people work on the game still, despite a lot of issues with their leadership.
For sure.
Anyway, I digress. I play a lot of that stuff. I get very deep into that stuff when I do. My two big games of the year so far, not counting Elden Ring because it's big.
It says everybody.
And
That's
everybody
just
knows.
ubiquitous.
The two big ones are Tunic and Unsighted.
Both incredible games.
Absolutely stellar. Tunic, absolutely 100% top-notch presentation, incredible visuals, so much to explore and discover, everything that the player is expected to learn or try to figure out over the course of the game is absolutely genius. It was incredible. Just being able to solve all the little secrets toward the end. All of the moment-to-moment gameplay is great. Obviously it's a hard game, but I've grown up playing a lot of them, so it was a very comfortable difficulty for me. Obviously that might not be for everyone, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was stellar. Unsighted is in very much the same boat. Definitely an underappreciated game for me. I think the developers just absolutely knocked everything they were doing there out of the park. There's so much I love about the game that I can't say because almost everything is a spoiler because it's so full of these little aha kinds of moments.
Sure.
Almost anything I say, if you're listening to this right now and you've not played Tunic or Unsighted, and either of them looks even kind of good to you, please buy them, play them. I think Unsighted is even on Game Pass. You don't even have to buy it. Tunic might also be on Game Pass. I'm not sure you have to buy any of it. Please take the time into your schedule, play these games. It's 100% worth it. They're both absolutely stellar. Those are my top 2 of the year out of non-big AAA things I've played.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I loved my experience playing 30XX. You were an incredible co-op partner who didn't make fun of me for face tanking half the level.
It's almost like I've been demoing games at these shows for like a decade. I'm glad the experience shows. It's a lot of work.
So obviously there's no release date yet, no additional platforms yet, but everyone can go to Steam right now, go into early access, buy the game and play it and get the updates.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it's been a year and a half on early access. We're very happy with the amount and polish in the content that's game there right now. If that sounds good to you, it's definitely going to be right up your alley.
Thank you, Chris, so much for taking this time with me. We have a saying on the show, it's happy gaming. It's this idea that there's so much shitty negativity online and you're buried under that. And I just at shows like this, you want to just enjoy games, have fun, be happy.
Supposedly we're an entertainment industry.
So if you could say happy gaming, we'll wrap up the interview.
Happy gaming.
And I'm chatting with David from Prime Matter. David, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for being here.
I just got to play Gungrave Gore. I am an old school Gungrave fan. I love the anime. I love the original game. Minutes into this game, it feels exactly like its PS2 predecessor, and I don't mean that in a bad way. The controls are intuitive, and the chaos starts early. Talk a little bit about this franchise coming back seemingly from the grave and what it's been like to support something that's been so beloved by its original fans.
I mean, it's great to see pretty much the fan reaction, like your reaction as well. We had a lot of people coming to us and be like, we're so happy that this is back. This was, of course, challenging to get this back. It's like an old IP, which, it has a dedicated fan base, but we pretty much wanted to get it into, modern days. You've seen some of the changes from the previous game. We still have the old UI, fans will be familiar with that, but we have a lot of new stuff in the game as well. New abilities, over-the-top action as people are used to it. So, I mean, we're super excited just showing off the game. That's pretty much it.
Now, talk a little bit about what it's like to start this game. You have to be not aware of a previous story, but still make it accessible for people who've maybe never heard of Gungrave before. Was that a challenge to make it that balance so people could step into this not having any experience?
I mean, actually, it isn't even a balance because, for people who've played all the previous games, they will be quite familiar with the story, what is happening in the story. But for everyone who isn't actually familiar with the game, or with the previous games, in the final game, we will actually have a whole recap video and explaining what has happened in the previous game. So even for newcomers, it's not really a challenge to get into because you get all of the information of what happened.
So now it must be difficult but satisfying to take something that was so core to the PS2 experience and bring it to modern consoles. A lot of games that come back from an older place don't always get that update they need. And so it must have been really important to make sure that this felt like something of this generation.
Yeah, definitely. The developers themselves were huge fans of the PlayStation 2 games. They are not the original ones who created the PlayStation 2. It's a new studio called Iggy Mob in South Korea. But they were huge fans of the PlayStation 2 games and the anime as well. So pretty much it was a fan dream for them coming true to actually, get this new game now in the series. And what they actually did is they reached out to Yasuhiro Naito, who created Gungrave and who created Trigun, and they pretty much asked him if, they can work on a game in the series. And they also reached out to the license holder as well. And, everyone was on board. Then they reached out to us, Prime Matter, as a publisher, and we were on board as well. So, kind of everyone's just excited of, getting an old game from the PS2 era pretty much now back in new heights, yeah.
You briefly mentioned the PAX West experience. Talk a little bit about what it's been like to have it here, live and in person. We've been living through a pandemic that's not quite over yet, but we're trying to get back out there and meet people. It must be super satisfying to have folks come to the booth, talk about how excited they are, and interact with the game in person.
Yeah, definitely. So, before the pandemic, we slowly created or, revealed trailers, showcased the game a little bit in CGI trailers. So we kind of got a little bit of feedback, from the internet, from people on Twitter, on YouTube, you name it. But now seeing, fan reactions of actually playing the game. And as you said, this is the first hands-on demo we have here in the United States. We had a week prior to this, we were at Gamescom, showing it off at Gamescom. But just seeing fan reaction is amazing. And we have so many people just coming to us and saying hey, I played this back then. It's finally back, and that's just great. Yeah.
Has there been an equal amount of reception from new people who are just like curious about it and want to see it and see what all the buzz is about, but don't have any experience with it?
Like we have a lot of people who are like familiar with like the art style because they know Yasuhiro Naito maybe from Trigun, or people say like, oh, this looks like Devil May Cry, and it's like, yeah, it is this type of action game. So people just got curious from the art style and the art direction of the game.
I love that. Now, there's no release date yet. We don't know.
There is a release date.
Have they announced the release date?
Yeah, so the release date is the 22nd of November. So, not long waiting time anymore. We're almost there. But yeah, we're releasing on all major platforms except Nintendo Switch. So PlayStation, Xbox, PC, it will be there.
Amazing. I hadn't heard that there was a release date. That's wonderful. And so you mentioned, of course, that it's not on the Nintendo Switch. Probably the Nintendo Switch can't support it. It's a little too advanced for that. Is there any want or desire to get a version of this game out there, or maybe a different version of this game out there?
I mean, we're constantly looking at options, what's available on the market as well. And with Nintendo Switch, we have to release the game now on all other platforms. If the demand is there, that's definitely something we will be looking into as well.
That's awesome. And so it's going to be on all major platforms. What kind of experience can people expect? Is this something like run and gun much faster? Is there going to be a huge narrative? Like, what kind of structure is this game? Obviously, it's an action game, like you mentioned, in the vein of Devil May Cry and those kind of action games. But from what I understand, it also has a very deep narrative and an incredible story.
Exactly. So, it has a very deep story in terms of, if you've seen the anime, if you've played the previous game, there is actually a story surrounding Grave and why, he's undead and why he's now on a journey of vengeance against Seed. So if you're familiar, with the previous story, you can look forward to, a continuation of that and like some more reveals as well. In terms of, gameplay, it's just over the top action, We wanted to make this as easily accessible as possible, but also, we always say like easy to learn, hard to master. So people who've, not familiar with this type of genre, they can just grab the controller, press a button, and over-the-top action will happen. But for people who, are seeking for a challenge, we do offer that as well. So think of it as like, as soon as you finish a level, you will actually be scored on how well you perform. And according to that, you get different rewards as well. And then you can also choose different difficulty settings as well.
That's incredible. And I love that you mentioned the accessibility options and the fact that there's a challenge here if you want it. But if you also want to experience the story, it sounds like there are modes, other difficulties, things like that, where you can really just jump in and experience the story and not have to worry about the challenge.
Exactly. That's pretty much it. Like, as I said, like we wanted this to be also accessible for newcomers who have never played this type of game. So, we got the best of both worlds.
That's incredible. Well, David, thank you for being so generous with your time. Gungrave Gore looks incredible, sounds incredible. I'm very excited to play it. We have a saying on the podcast, and the saying is happy gaming. It's this idea that PAX preserves that there can be a lot of harsh criticism online. People are not great on Twitter and other social platforms. But in person, when we get to spend time like this, we can just appreciate and love games for what they are. So if you could say happy gaming, we'll wrap up the interview.
Happy gaming.
I'm talking with Gyun, the developer, the mastermind behind It's a Wrap. Talk a little bit about the conceit of this game and why this is a little different from other platformers.
So basically it's very different from other platformers because it's mostly a puzzle game. So every level you play both as the director and the actor of a movie scene. And as the director, your job is to synchronize events that happens in the scene in order to then be able, as the actor, to like go through the level and platform your way up to the goal.
What I really love about the game from the minute you get into it is they really kind of teach you the basic core tenets, and then you're left to kind of figure out the puzzle on your own. When creating this game, was the inception always to kind of create this mastery of puzzles and platforming?
Yeah, we really want the puzzle to be the most important part of the game. Platforming is more like a set of rules that is very common to many games that most gamers know that we use in order to like create puzzles. It's actually not all levels are about platforming. Some have different controls, like space shooters or like top-down car vehicle-based level. All that matters for us is that we use like common rules that are very known by players and are easy to remember in order for them to be able to preview what they're going to do in the level and solve the puzzle based on that.
It's really fascinating. What caught my attention about it is this idea of using what essentially looks like a video editing software to convey the puzzle mechanics. And as someone who edits podcasts and edits video, it's so translatable and feels like it's speaking to the movie making experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we created the game during a game jam where the theme was rewind, which let us thought about some video-related mechanics, and we brainstormed until we got to the idea of video editing. And it seemed like a very interesting time-related mechanic to put in a puzzle game, and so that's how it was created. Really, that's the gist.
What I love about the game also is comedy seems really important to this, right? You could have made this super serious and you could chastise people for failing, but instead, every time you fail, the director pops up and yells "cut," and when you get clobbered by a snowball, you get stuck in it. Was that always the core from the beginning? You wanted to be some levity and humor with this game?
Yeah, it's a good point. It was really something we wanted to make a puzzle game that also light-hearted and fun to look at and to play. Because so many puzzle games are so complicated in their stories and their setting and very psychological and stuff like that. And we kind of think it's really possible to make a game that lets you use your brain but also make you laugh and not have such a heavy drama setting. It's also related to the art style. It's very cartoony, thanks to our art director Dominic Schwager, who used to do comic. And so it fits perfectly, basically.
It does have a very Sunday morning funnies kind of cartoony comic book aesthetic. I also love the sound design. I love how smoothly it operates. I want to talk a little bit about accessibility, though. A lot of puzzle games, you can hit a wall, and then that's it. You're stuck forever. You can't play. Do you have any kind of accessibility options for this game to make it a little more forgiving or give people ability to go to the next level, those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, puzzle game, it's hard to make them balanced because it really depends on the player. Some players will finish a level in 20 seconds, and for some others it will be impossible to solve. So it's a big concern of us. First of all, we do a lot of play tests before validating that a level is good to try to limit the puzzles that really have a big proportion of people that don't understand them. And second of all, we have a mechanic inside the game, a hint system basically. The common problem with hint system in puzzle game is that they are not necessarily in sync with what the players are thinking when they use them. And it's extremely frustrating when you play a puzzle game and you figured out 90% of the solution, but you're just stuck at those last 10%. And then you have to go through the hint system telling you step by step all the things that you already figured out. So our solution to that is that the hint system is based on the idea of having tickets that you can use in a more strategic way. So since the timeline mechanics have different tracks and different clips, basically you can choose to use a hint on a specific track to show you where that track is how that track is supposed to be set up. And so it's all up to the player. It adds some strategical thinking because then it's up to the player to know how they want to use the hints. For example, you want to figure out where is the best place to use your hint, then you have to think about what you know already works and what doesn't work yet. Or you can also use it the other way around, you want a hint, but you don't want it to be too strong because you still want to enjoy the rest of the level. So you can just use the hint on something that is maybe less relevant to the entire solution of the level.
I love that, giving people the ability to pick and choose what they want help with. Now, obviously, the set design and the scenes are very much influenced by pop culture. There are Indiana Jones references to The Thing, and other things, sci-fi, action. Is the team all really big fans of these kinds of different films and wanted to see what kind of things you could incorporate while making it your own?
Yeah, so basically the game is based on Hollywood of the 80s and all the movie scenes, we have 3 movies, they are all based on strong genre that are very, very strong in that era. We have Indiana Jones, we have references to Terminator, Blade Runner, Back to the Future, a lot of Schwarzenegger movies. One reason was, first of all, it's an era that was full of classical movies that are really still amazing today.
Yeah.
And second of all, It's one of the last decades that still used a lot of practical effects, which really fits our game, where it's all about timing, like props that are on the movie set. And it just fit really well. So that's why, yeah.
I mean, I love on the first stage when you're in this, like on this mountain, that a bridge falls, and that's the only thing you have to overcome. But when the bridge falls, if you fall with it, normally in a regular platform game, you'd be dead. But instead, you fall to the basement. They complain about how one of the alligators got taken out. Like, it's very clear that this is a love letter and homage to those kinds of films. As far as the game's complete package and like the what you see for it, do you have an idea of the kind of runtime you wanted for this game? Did you want people to more focus on like speeding through it to see if they can get their best times? Or do you want it more to be an experience you can kind of take time with and kind of learn it?
Well, I think puzzle games are more about taking your time to think and being relaxed. So yeah, for us, it's not about speeding through because it doesn't work so well. Like a lot of people ask about, is it going to be speed runnable? But actually not so much, because like the solutions for every puzzles are just to be on time with what happens, and you don't have so many leeway into where you can be at every time. It's really definitely a chill experience that you can lay back and spend some nice moments with. In terms of total duration for the game, we're aiming for something around 5 to 6 hours. But that also really depends on the players, because for some it's going to be much longer, and maybe for some much shorter if they figure out the trips.
I'm curious about platforms. Obviously, there's a demo on Steam right now. Do you have intent to go on console as well? Is the focus just for Steam right now and then see what happens?
So it's, first of all, a PC game, but we are absolutely thinking about going on consoles. It's just not official yet. Hopefully that comes soon.
That's amazing. And I have to imagine, like, it's very intuitive for keyboard and mouse, but it would require some additional UI and interface for a controller, because you're selecting with the mouse the individual lines like it's a video editor.
Yeah, since it's inspired by actual softwares, like video editing softwares that are used on PC, of course, much more than on consoles. It's much more natural to use the mouse and the keyboard. But we've already done a lot of work to make it accessible with the gamepad. Like, we've added a lot of shortcuts to simplify the controls with a less precise cursor than the mouse. And it works well. It's fine. Also with a touch screen, you can mimic some of the inputs of the mouse with using a touch screen. So that works pretty well.
I haven't thought of that, but yeah, if it comes to Switch, like, you could just use the touch screen to move things along and then play the stage with the controller parts. I think that's really brilliant. Do you have a timeline for the game? Is there an expected release date?
Yeah, it's supposed to come out on the first half of next year.
Amazing. And what would you say is your favorite stage or moment in this game? A thing that really stands out to you is like, this is a funny or fun moment.
Well, it's hard because there are so many, but like for me, my level of hard was the infiltration one with the big robot, because it's one of the oldest one, and one of the first one we really worked on, and still like stands up to this day. Like, it's like you can really see a lot of people having fun with it, and it's really enjoyable to watch that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm so excited for It's a Wrap. We have a saying on the podcast, it's happy gaming. It's this idea that people take gaming too seriously. People are really mean online, and we just want people to enjoy the things they're playing and just really get in the moment of playing games. So if you could say happy gaming, we'll wrap up the interview.
Okay, and happy gaming. Yeah, I totally agree with that idea. Happy gaming, and thank you.
So I'm here with Kieran Kelly of Larian Studios. It's me, Matt, and I'm here with
Finn, Matt's friend, Scott,
Josh.
And we are a Divinity Original Sin group that meets every Monday, and we're chatting a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3 and, of course, Divinity Original Sin 2. Scott had some very important questions to ask.
Right. And this trend also deals with Baldur's Gate 3. One of my biggest, quote-unquote, complaints with Original Sin 2 was, I'm the thief rogue guy, but I can only steal from people once. Will I be able to steal from people multiple times in Baldur's Gate 3? And if not, is there a way I can mod the ability so I can steal from people multiple times in either game?
So you steal from everybody in the game, you get all their money, and then you want to rinse them again by stealing from them again?
Well, if I'm stealing when I'm a lower level, I'm not as good of a thief, or I don't have, like, invisibility to steal.
So I can't go into the full details of what our NPC reaction system will be like, but it's definitely evolving, just like all the other systems in DOS 2 have evolved from BG3. But like, if you're going to rinse somebody out of their house and home of all their money, I don't think they're going to suddenly come into a Dragon Hoard's worth of gear again for you to steal after a few hours of gameplay.
I don't want them to like regain stuff, but like in Original Sin 2, I can only steal X amount. It could be a very small amount of their stuff before the bar is like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I want to be able to like go back when I'm a bit better thief. Maybe have it be riskier, but be able to take some of the things I missed.
Well, like the reality is that because we're in early access, I can't say what we'll do now because it may change. But like, we're very, like, if you look at DOS 1's stealing mechanics and then DOS 2's stealing mechanics and now BG3's, we are constantly evolving those systems. And also when you look at how we have to play with the D&D system a lot more, and that gives us a lot of extra kind of interesting decisions and things that we get to do with the D20. Yeah. So those key roles are much more important in this game than they were in DOS 2. In DOS 2, there was a dice system at play, but it wasn't so prevalent and so in your face. And so by elevating the dice system in BG3 with the D20, there's a lot of fun that comes with that. And so especially when it comes with stealing or pushing your luck in different ways, we're always pushing the boundaries to see what we can do. So all I can say is maybe it'll depend on where the fun is, basically.
Perfect. So I'm going to hit you with a little swerve. What would you say is your favorite quality of life or UI upgrade from DOS 2 to Baldur's Gate 3?
Just one.
Go as many as you want.
Standouts. The issue as well is you got to remember that we're playing with internal builds that have even more improvements. The UI again is always improving. Like if you remember the original time we showed this game at PAX, was it 2020?
Yeah. The one right before the world went to hell.
Exactly. No, and we showed it publicly, right? And everyone was like, "Oh, it's DOS 3," because it used a lot of the same elements in UI, and a lot of it had actually been redone even back then, but the structure of it had been similar and stuff. So one of the struggles that we had was actually how do we implement the spell system in D&D and a few other things that D&D brought to the table that was a little bit inelegant in our first iterations of our UI system. And even now, like as you can see, when you start upcasting spells and stuff like that, actually you might not have seen it at level 1, but like at level 3 and 4, and then obviously in 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, when you're upcasting your spells, we now have UI systems within UI systems that actually make it so much more robust and interesting. And our guys are also exploring ways of teaching you the game beyond the tutorial using the UI. So those evolve, again, we're constantly evolving to make it as good as we can. So there's no one single change. I actually like
That's the most diplomatic answer I've ever heard.
I've got a lot of devs behind me here going, what are you talking about? My thing or your thing? No, in reality, like I actually love how clean the new bar is. I actually kind of like that slightly detached look over the solid bar and stuff. So there's a lot of cool refinements that have come from that. Also, one of the things I noticed when you guys were playing, and it's not a UI thing necessarily, it's a gameplay thing, but I'm really loving the simultaneous turns.
Yes.
I think that's such a great little addition that the guys did for the combat system because it really speeds up multiplayer gameplay, especially where it's like, it could be your turn, then my turn. And even though we're all technically acting at the same time, I have to wait for both of you, and you might forget to hit end turn or whatever. No. Now we can all just go, and actually it can result in some pretty cool moves depending on how you plan that out as well.
I was going to say, one thing about Divinity is the way your systems interact with each other leads to some ridiculous outcomes, so I can't wait to see what Baldur's Gate offers.
My next question is focused on the narrative. So obviously in Divinity Original Sin 2 and Divinity 1, the narrative was important and you made a lot of important choices, but it was this bird's eye view. It felt a little removed, whereas clearly in Baldur's Gate 3, you're in the action. The multiplayer characters are in the cutscenes. Was that an active decision to bring the narrative in more focused, give people more choice and make them feel more absorbed in the moment to moment?
Narrative is a huge factor for us. And actually, as you've pointed out with the cutscenes, even just while it's a visual upgrade, the addition of having cinematic dialogues is ginormous for us, right? And doing that was not a small investment. Like the cinematics team alone is 50, 60, 70 people. It's a huge team to get this much dialogue into the game. And we're already looking at a game that's in early access, rivaling DOS 2 in terms of size, right? So it's a huge undertaking, but that alone allows you to invest in the character. Like, I know Shadowheart, it feels like on a more personal level than I knew any of the DOS 2 origins, just because I can see her and see her mannerisms and her acting. And even now, like, our cinematics team only recently released, they call it sustained acting, where like they have little mannerisms for every single line of dialogue that's being said. And those mannerisms change based on their emotional reaction to something you said previously. So they might say the same line twice, but look slightly differently based on what I've said, right? So all of those things that we're doing is all in service of the party, the narrative, and everything else. But yeah, just like in DOS 2, narrative is huge, man. And also those origin stories where you can explore those personal stories within that larger narrative is a big part of it. And actually, you'll see in this one, there's a much bigger emphasis on the party. Because in DOS 2, while, yeah, you were sorcerers and then Godwoken, it became very individualistic. In this one, you're all kind of doing your own thing. You've all got your own problems and everything else. But the problem that you're given, to a certain degree, is a lot more unifying in that, like, yeah, we're all in this together. We need to solve it together. So you'll see, like, we're going to do it over the coming months and year as we're trying to launch BG3. You'll see us really focusing in on how much of those interactions in the party matter. Even the voice sparks you'll see as you wander around the world, those party members, even the ones you're not directly controlling, are talking to each other, and that relationship grows over time as well. So much, we're really trying to make it as a we're trying to really enhance the narrative on the micro level as well as the macro level, for sure.
Going back to your cinematic camera and everything, it was fun. Like, while in one of the cutscenes, his character was in the interaction and the dialogue and everything, and my character, he mentioned that you can see my character kind of sneaking around and doing whatever I'm doing in the background, and it's just, we had a good chuckle at that. Like, and it's very much like our original Sin 2 party. They'll be doing the dialogue, and as I'm like sneaking around, probably getting into trouble, and being able to now, he sees that in a more cinematic nature. It adds to that kind of hilarity and party dynamics.
Yeah, there's some pretty funny things you could do in there, because like the cinematics are live happening while you're in the world. They're not like recorded cutscenes that you cut out of, like that you black screen out of and then go into the cutscene. So yeah, you can do some pretty wacky stuff for sure. But one of the things as well is that, again, one of the most recent patches added in, if you played when we first launched and you got into a dialogue with somebody, everybody was basically standing super still except for the person in the dialogue. And we've changed that now so that everyone actually reacts to the dialogue as it's happening. Just adds that extra little bit of immersion that the party is listening to the situation.
So this is one of your first major public appearances since the world going to hell. What would you say has been the public reception to this newest look at Baldur's Gate 3?
So we did PAX East, which gave us a lot of, and we actually did EGX before that. So we've been kind of warming up onto the circuit again for a while now. But honestly, I think that people, obviously there's still a lot of nervousness and people are taking their time coming back. And I think that's the wise thing to do. We're taking every precaution here that we can in terms of wiping down every station and taking care of people. And we've had to space out our demos to do that. And so we're taking every precaution we can. But I think, honestly, it's just great to see people again, see people enjoy the game. The reason why we do this, and these are very expensive shows, but they're a celebration of not just our game, but games in general. It's a great opportunity to literally go face to face with your fans, see their reaction. Even with the DOS 2 board game, you can design in spreadsheets and in InDesign and Photoshop all day long, and you can have good ideas and you can know what's going to work on the table. But then seeing the players light up in those circumstances for any game that we work on is such it's an energizing thing for a dev, because you can be in your bunker working away for months, and you come to a place like this and you're exhausted after the weekend, but you're reinvigorated because the passion that you share is shared with the fans.
Nice. I have one quick request, and maybe you mentioned how characters have respond to what's being said in cinematics and everything. I don't know if it's planned or maybe down the road if there's time, but is there any interaction where, like, if someone's distracting, like a shopkeeper or something, and someone sneaks up, do you see the person swiping, like picking things out of their bag? That would be funny to see, like pickpocketing and like seeing like things being pulled out of their pocket.
The individual animation of the actual pickpocket. TBD, because as you can probably imagine, those animations are very time consuming to make. And they're also, they're very situational in their uses, right? So you'll actually notice that a huge amount of work has been done to make the game look good in a closer field of vision. Like DOS 2 had the advantage of most of the time you're watching that game, you're playing that game from a top-down perspective. And while you're playing a lot of your BG3 interactions like that, because every single dialogue is cinematically done, we have to allow the quality, the visual quality and fidelity of the game to go way up so that when you zoom in, you have those. So like, we do our best to make that immersion as strong as possible, but obviously there's going to be limitations in every game and how much we can animate.
More of a joke request, but the team has done such a great job. It looks fantastic. The character models, the environments, effects.
The thing is about your joke request is that, like, in reality, we have considered it, right? Like, so much of this game is we want to, like, I think I've said this in so many interviews. I've probably told you about this before, but like back when we were working on DOS 1, it was, we had a kind of an ethos that was like, not best described, but definitely very well described with a piece of paper that used to be on the punch board in the Ghent office. And it literally said, "Why can I move the plant pot? Because it's there." And the plant pot means nothing to the narrative, to the story. It's not got any combat relevance necessarily, but we allow you to move it and interact with it because it's physically in the world. And that kind of literally just echoes into every system that we have in the game. It's a mentality that we've had for a very long time. And it's taken us this long over this 20 years to get to the stage where we know how to build entire worlds and narratives in this systematic way. Like Sven recently did a demo where he showed a situation where there's a gunpowder. You'll love this. There's a situation later in Act 1 where there's a gnome that's going to basically threaten to kill you and her by blowing up a gunpowder paddle, right? And so it's smoke powder, so not gunpowder. And we're getting our photo taken right now. So he was showing this demo, and she's basically step back, get away from me, whatever. And in true Larian style, you can keep pushing your luck, and she'll do it. She'll blow everyone up. Or you can back away and whatever else. However, you can have it where a friend of yours sneaks around the back and literally takes the smoke powder barrel away from her. And then the dialogue, if you then push her to the limit, she'll try and blow it up. And she's like, where did it go? So much like so that's how deep we go in terms of how much reactivity we want to allow. And that had to be deliberately, like, you can't programmatically make that up, right? Our designers had to go, hey, wait a minute, what if someone takes the barrel? And then they went in and they recorded the voice lines for it, the mocap for it, everything. So as much as possible, we do that across the board. And that's just one very, very small example of what we do.
So cool.
I love that. My last question is there something you've seen live that you couldn't have imagined someone would do, or like a fun moment where someone's playing and they're messing with something and you're like, that's brilliant, that's a great idea, like surprises from the fans?
Oh God. I mean, we get them all the time. A lot of the time they're either, they're sometimes bugs, obviously in early access.
Sure.
But generally speaking, I don't have anything specific. You've kind of hit me at it. It's the morning right now, just context. It's the morning and you're hitting me with a difficult question.
Way to put them on the spot.
Way to put me on the spot. No, I think honestly, it's innovation that we love, right? So we see it a lot in DOS 2 as well, but in BG3, I guess some of the innovations that we really like is with those barrels, with the smoke powder barrels, but we've moved away from those to a certain degree to allow for the more heavy D&D mechanics. Honestly, one of the coolest things that we've been seeing is how much people are playing with the height mechanics in the game. There's so much more interactivity in terms of the verticality of the game. So one of the things that our designers have had to do, I had an interesting conversation with our lead combat designer, Edward, about 6 months ago, where he was talking about how in DOS 2, you don't realize it because there is height in that game, but actually everything is on a flat plane. And so it's much easier to AI program and also to plan for combat encounters sure. So it's more like these squares have an advantage, these squares don't, right? But now with the verticality that we have in the game, there is all sorts of wacky stuff that our players can do based on the height differences and the various options that they have there. That they've had to relook at a few encounters because of that. But I don't have a specific innovation, I'm afraid, that's jumping to mind right this second.
I mean, that's still a great story, this idea that there seems to be so much verticality. Like, Josh is a ranger in our campaign and is always finding the highest point. But the fact that it's not really a height difference in the same way that it is in Baldur's Gate 3 is really exciting.
Yeah, in Baldur's Gate 3, you go to the Goblin Camp, there's a fight there with Drow Raglan that, if I remember this right, has at least 3 major levels of verticality and then 2 or 3 in between. So you can like go up onto the rafters, like hit the chandeliers that are burning embers, knock them down on top of them. Then the guy on the ground, he's also on an upward platform, so that's like a half point of interaction. And then depending on your positioning, you can also knock some of his goons into the spider pit below. So like the amount of literal 3D chess that our combat designers have to think of for all the different things that can happen. So yeah, those fights can get uber messy, which is a good reason for the new AI, where we do swarm AI. So yeah, that's. Did you see the swarm AI in action?
I'm in the early access and stuff, so I've dabbled in and seen a bit of it. It's impressive.
The original goblin fights were like 20 goblins in a fight would go on for an hour and a half just because of each individual goblin taking a turn. And now they all act at the same time. So if you do accidentally, start a fight with absolutely everybody in a camp, it's okay. It's not going to blow up your computer.
We've never done that. We've never wiped out an entire town in Divinity. And why would we do that?
So we know you're super busy, so we want to thank you for all your time, but we also, want you to be able to star yourself. So why don't you just let everyone know who you are and what you do at Larian and why you're so cool?
Well, look, my name's Kieran Kelly. I'm part of the publishing team, product manager. I work on numerous different projects. You'll see my hands in some of the work we do for Panel from Hell. You'll see me obviously at PAXs like this. I'm working on the DOS 2 board game. Honestly, there's an absolute army behind me that do so much work for this game. So not the culture of us to go, elevate me, please. But yeah, we're very, very thankful.
I just wanted because you're cool and
I appreciate it, man. No, honestly, I just do what I can for the company and for the team and the game when we can. And that usually has me in different positions at different times. So yeah.
And where can people follow Larry and Baldur's Gate or anything like that if they want to keep progress on it?
Yeah, best places on our socials, which will be at Larian Studios. It's pretty much Larian Studios everywhere. I believe it's the same. We've recently launched a TikTok if you're interested in that sort of thing. You'll see a lot of that around PAX especially. We've been doing some crazy stuff with the Mind Flayer, who's called Fred, by the way.
Fred is very nice. I've met him a few times. He's really, really a sweet guy.
So he's the new star of TikTok. So you'll see that soon.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was great. It's fun as our Divinity crew to kind of just chat with you and share how much we love this game and how we're excited for the new game too. Larian's work is on a level that I think just doesn't compare to any other studio because the amount of love you put into these games, it's clear that you're fans just like we are.
Yeah, 100%. We're gamers making games for ourselves as much as you guys.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I'm here with Solar and Gabriel, the masterminds behind Cage Studios and Sherwood Extreme. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. We're so excited.
We're really happy to be here. So I just got to play the demo, and what I love about this game is it's got that low poly, kind of goofy comedy feel to it. You're slowing time, bullet time, to archer your way through these speedrun levels and take out goblins. Where does this idea come from? Is there a deep love of the name that we're not going to mention that obviously inspires this, or well, it's public domain, isn't Robin Hood public domain?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I never remember which is and isn't, but so clearly there's a Robin Hood influence. Yeah. Clearly there is a love of archery. Is that something that you've liked in other games? It's something you actually are archers who like archery? I'm curious where this comes from.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think Robin Hood is definitely one of our heroes. We really like the whole concept of a silly action hero type vibe. We were definitely going for that action hero kind of feel. And then as far as like the game goes, we kind of took with our last game was more of like an open world RPG slow thing, and we wanted something that really like packs a punch instantly. Like you get in, just jump, and you're doing slow motion parkour, and it just like gets you hooked really quickly. And we like having those like shorter play sessions through each level and let you get into that flow.
That's awesome. And so I was talking earlier, the campaign is about an hour or so, but that's not where it ends. That's not the goal. The campaign's nice, but it's about replaying, speed running, mastering your times. Are you folks who like to speed run games? Do you like seeing how fast you can do stuff? Or is this coming from a love to give to the audience more than yourselves?
I would say that we ourselves are not particularly speedrunners. We're more of those open world adventure type of gamers. But when we created our Discord community and started getting a lot of feedback for this game, it was very clear that this was meant to be for speedrunners. And so we adapted the game to support that community and basically give them the game that they wanted, and the love for the game that they gave us, we gave right back and said, we love you too, speedrunners.
So this game, the archery is super key, right? That's got to be perfect and pristine for the rest of the game to work. And like my favorite thing is there are zip lines that you can go down in slow motion and pick off the ships by hitting barrels, explosive barrels, like miles and miles away. The arc is so perfectly fine-tuned. Was that hard to figure out exactly how to make those arcs work in a way that the player felt like they were really in control of that?
That was something that we figured out pretty early, I think, in terms of the arcs. And it does change, actually, depending on which type of crossbow you have. So you have, like, a machine gun crossbow, as they did in the medieval times.
Of course, obviously.
And, like, the explosive crossbows. So then they'd have their advantages and disadvantages to, like, how far the shot goes. But we really wanted to feel like that drop-off that makes it unique from playing, like, a typical shooter with guns, where, like, you kind of have to think about the physics of it. And, the physics of the ragdolls and the explosions and everything. It all makes it feel very physical and in tune with what Robin Hood would have had to do with his bows.
Excellent. It's completely historically factual. I understand that. I want to talk a little bit about the design. So it's got this, like, I don't want to say kind of Minecraft, but like this low poly kind of old school PlayStation era game feel. Was that a conscious choice, or is that something you found in the development process?
Yeah, that's something we decided very early on. We wanted to commit to an art style that was cohesive for the vibe of the game. We don't take ourselves too seriously with Sherwood Extreme, right? It's a very over-the-top game. And we wanted something that we could commit to, and us ourselves, we're not necessarily artists, or experts in that field. So we wanted to do something that we could commit to and do well. And I believe we really pulled off something unique in that regard.
The classic kind of game vibe, the classic game vibe with the low poly, combined with the modern tech of Unreal Engine with the explosions and destructibles, that kind of combine in this way that makes it feel nostalgic, but still modern.
Yeah.
So now I'm terrible at the game without a controller, so I didn't get very far. But I'm curious, what is the most ridiculous thing you put in this game that's not a huge spoiler? Something that like might entice people to check out this really wacky game?
Some of the coolest things, I think, are when you blow up a giant gate and there's just barrels going on around it and the whole thing just explodes and you run through it. That's one of my favorite moments in the game, especially when you nail it with a mid-air backflip while you're doing it. Just, beautiful.
My favorite thing, explosive chickens.
Yeah. Who doesn't love explosive chickens, right?
Right.
So this game is out now. It's available on Steam.
Yes.
And is there plans for other platforms? Is there a desire to like publish this across? I mean, I could see sitting on a plane with a Switch, playing this game, or playing with a bunch of friends in the same room, that kind of thing.
Definitely. So we're in early access right now for free on Steam. Next year, in Q4, we are planning to launch on Xbox as well. And we are working on trying to get on Switch. The Steam Deck will be supported as well for the handheld experience. And just trying to get us on as many platforms as possible so more people can play the game.
It just feels like the kind of game that would like really. So is there a multiplayer aspect to this game? And if so, like talk a little bit about that experience versus the speedrun version. Like what is the major differences between the two modes?
Yeah, we have an online co-op version. And we like having the cooperative version instead of a competitive to kind of bring people together. So you load in with one player sitting on your shoulders and you can jump off, split up, grapple back on, and then you can do flips while you're attached to each other. And it's just like really goofy and silly. And like, speedrunning in co-op is kind of a unique element that it has as well. We have 2 players right now and we're looking to expand that as well. And even the survival mode is especially fun in co-op.
Is there a desire to do some kind of competitive mode in the future? Maybe a head-to-head or something like that? Or is the preference to just focus on co-op?
I think that we're really focused on the cooperative experience and team building and that positivity that can come from that. PvP was something we looked at pretty early on, and we just decided that wasn't a good fit for this game. This game is for players to have fun together, for the competitive players out there, we have indirect competition through the leaderboards and all that sort of thing, as well as ranking systems to prove that you are indeed the best.
Now, to embarrass you both, are you both good at your own game? And if so, what are some of your best times?
No.
I'll attest to Gabriel not being good at the game. I think I'm good at the game until I compare myself to actual speedrunners. My best score is on the level called Fortnite. Not the thing that kids are talking about these days.
Right.
I am second on the leaderboard for that. You can see me there. That one I'm pretty proud of. But I think I'm like in the first level, which is only like 30 seconds long. I think I take like 5 or 10 more seconds to beat that level than like your pro speedrunners out there.
As someone who grew up playing a lot of stuff offline, I'm old. We'll just leave it at that. Like the minute that online gaming became a thing, I love it, and I love playing cooperative, but competitive. I used to think I was the best Mario Kart player, especially in the N64 generation. And then when I got to the Wii and I started playing online, I'm like, wow, I suck. But it's always fun to see that like friendly competition. I think comedy is so inherent in this game. Was that from the get always important to make it comedic, make it goofy instead of taking yourselves too seriously?
Yeah, we always wanted to make humor a core pillar of this game. And that doesn't need to necessarily be in the ways we always think of humor in. Novelty and wackiness and just over-the-top nature of everything in this game lends itself to that humor, and it's always been critical in our game pillars from the design from the get-go.
Even from the very start, we had our 3 core game pillars from day one, which was high-speed action, arcade mastery, which is like the leaderboards and stuff, and then humor was the 3rd pillar.
Yeah.
If you had to pick just one crossbow as your favorite crossbow in the game, which crossbow would that be? And first, I have to ask for myself, I play a lot of first-person shooters, mostly arcadey ones, and I always love a shotgun. Is there a shotgun-style crossbow?
My favorite crossbow is the Tommy bow, where you can shoot like a machine gun. You still have the arrow fall off on it, so it still feels really unique, but just like being able to just like spray down everybody, just like so funny and fun. We have been prototyping a shotgun crossbow. However, it is not released yet.
Okay, that's good to know. That gives me very high hopes. I'm very excited.
My favorite bow in the game is the explosive crossbow. It is the world's first hand cannon in history. So it's my favorite because it makes me feel like I'm living through a Michael Bay movie always.
Explosions are always fun, especially when you can walk away from them in slow motion.
Absolutely.
The game looks great. I'm very excited to play more of it. Tell folks where they can go get it right now in the early access, and maybe just a little bit about what the plan is for the future. You know, you mentioned that you're in early access now and you want to do other platforms, but where you see this game going, is it going to have a longevity of like online support and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have early access on Steam right now for free. You can pick up the game and play with your friends in online co-op. We are planning to, add new game modes, add new levels, and at the end of the day, we take a lot of feedback from our community on Discord, and they're really the ones who drive like what we work on. They're like, yeah, I mean, more levels would be cool, but we really want this shotgun so bad. And we're like, we're going to listen to you. We're making this game for you guys. If you have any suggestions, come find us on our Discord, and we're always listening.
Amazing. I love this. Thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with me. Last thing I'll ask you to do is you have a saying on the show, and it's happy gaming. This idea that games are taken too seriously. People are really mean on the internet, and we just want people to enjoy games on the broad. So if Gabriel, you could say happy, and then you could say gaming, we'll close out the interview.
Happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.